What completely altered your body without you realizing? Story 1. Stress. Yep, caused teeth clenching, teeth grinding, shoulder pain from tension, weight gain from stress eating, mental health and emotional issues, and trouble concentrating. The list goes on. I had terrible neck/shoulder pain for most of 2023. After 2 MRIs, the neuro said, "Your body's fine, I think you need a massage." Turns out I literally was holding on to all of the anxiety I've been living with for decades. It was really eye-opening, honestly. Focusing on releasing physical tension has really made a difference in my mental health. As a kid, I was diagnosed with asthma because I randomly had trouble eating. One time at work, I couldn't breathe and went to urgent care. I was fine by the time I got there, and for some reason they referred me to a speech therapist. So I went to my first appointment with the speech therapist and they put a camera down my throat to look at my vocal cords. The doctor points at the TV and says, "See how much they're twitching? They're not supposed to do that. You hold your stress in your throat." I had to learn a few stretches and massage techniques and now it's no longer an issue. Turns out I never had asthma as a kid, the pediatrician just assumed. Quit my corporate job this year and started working at a small college. Stomach pain, gone. Sleeping problems, gone. Anxiety, gone. Headaches, gone. Happiness, arrived. Took a pay cut, but not as steep as I thought I was going to. I'm 39 years old, and I feel like I have added at least 10 years to my life in the last 6 months. Advice to everyone who has short-term disability insurance: use it. Go to the doctor, tell them about the stress. Have them fill out the paperwork for disability, and use all the time allowed. Don't look at work. Don't even think about work. Don't pick up the phone if they call. If your life is better after that time off, find a different job or career and enjoy the rest of your life. Persistent stress is behind pretty much every way our bodies crap out on us from within. A fantastic book to read about all the ways is Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert M. Sapolsky. It explains all kinds of things in terms of the science of what's going on in a very easy to understand and often humorous way. Our bodies are capable of handling predator, run, for as long as it takes to handle a quick emergency, but week after week of relentless same old stress? No. All our internal systems for handling stress get thoroughly messed up by that. Story 2. Pregnancy. I had twins. I got huge in the tummy. I had the babies, and it left this potbelly that wouldn't go away. Fast forward, the twins are 8 years old. I am 7 weeks post-op of having my diastasis recti corrected. Do you know that center line down the abs? Mine had split. There was a 6 to 8 inch gap down the middle, the whole way down. The potbelly that I kept punishing myself for? The baby fat I couldn't lose? Those were my organs. My digestive organs were all herniated. I now have to forgive myself for 8 years of unjustified self-hatred. It isn't always just fat. This happened to so many women I know. They thought they just couldn't shake the weight for anywhere from 10 to 30 years after childbirth. Turns out it was full of hernias in every situation. Herniated belly buttons even. One was even throwing in the towel after twins and scheduled a tummy tuck only to find out she would need to correct her previously unknown hernia. Once that was done, she never needed the tummy tuck. The hernia recovery was brutal, but way less brutal than a tummy tuck. So glad to hear you're feeling and doing better, and getting some relief finally. It's almost as if doctors should tell women about this, especially in the case of multiples during postpartum recovery checkups. Mine too, and I had an entrapped nerve from a cesarean. Abdominoplasty with muscle repair is the best thing that ever happened to me. 5 years of PT did nothing to fix the diastasis. Mine was only right under my ribs, so an OB gaslit me into thinking I didn't have it, but my PM&R doc said, "Yeah, you do, and the only thing that will fix it is surgery." Entrapped nerve pain that hurt when I would breathe, plus constantly throwing out my back. No matter how much work I did, gone. It's amazing, but I never should have had to wait so long or pay for it out of pocket. Women aren't broodmares. Our well-being and lives after childbirth matter. Don't even get me started on perimenopause symptoms that have gone undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for the last 4 years. Misdiagnoses include the psychiatrist saying it's bipolar or a sleep disorder. Nope. The PCP saying metabolic disorder. the endocrinologist saying it's anxiety, and the sleep doc sleep study says no sleep disorder. There's more, but guess what? It's perimenopause. OB said it wasn't that either. She instantly decided every symptom I brought her after my CBC came back normal was because I was histrionic and crazy. Nope, sweat-changing smell, uncontrollable midsection weight gain with no change in diet and exercise, mood changes, harder periods that last much longer, many hot flashes that I thought were just because I was fat now. Yeah, that's all perimenopause, and it started for me gradually in my mid-30s and has progressed. Turns out our bodies don't read the textbooks and do whatever the hell they want. Don't have children unless that's your life purpose. Adopt. It can very much screw up your body for the rest of your life. Fecal or urinary incontinence, hormonal changes that don't return to baseline. Pregnancy is still dangerous as hell, especially if you're a minority. Proceed with caution. Stockpile Plan B if you aren't sure you want one. You also don't know what kind of personality your kid will have. Could be a great fit, or they could be your worst nightmare and you are there with them for life. Pregnancy needs to be a choice, for the sake of women and for the sake of the children born to them. That said, I would have my kids again, but wish I had known my body would be wrecked and never good again. I would have done so many more bucket list things before I gave my health up in exchange for children. Okay, so I'm going to tell you right now that you are able to move a little better since your surgery. Keep wearing the wrap on your belly for up to a year or longer. My diastasis recti was the same as yours, and I was too physical and didn't wear the body wrap very much after 8 weeks or so. I did damage to the surgical site and the diastasis returned after about 12 months. Not as bad as it was. Now it's only 2.5 fingers width apart in one small area around my belly button, but still. I was bending and lifting grocery bags and working, and I didn't give my body enough time to heal. Buy waist trainers and keep your belly snug as much as you can, for as long as you can, and do not do any lifting for months if you can go without it. I was a size 3 when I got pregnant. I had bought 3 pairs of Calvin Klein jeans in size 3 and 1 in size 5. A couple of months before I got pregnant. After having the kid, I realized I'd never wear a size 3 again. My size 5 was tight on my hips. I also went from a B cup to a double D. They went down to a D after I stopped breastfeeding. I also found out I had an irritable uterus, which ended up being endometriosis. My oldest is 21 and my youngest is almost 16, and I'm still experiencing health issues from pregnancy. I had to take terbutaline with the first 2. Found out I had a leaky heart valve when the second one was 3 years old. Never had one, and no one in my family has had that issue. Recently, I had open heart surgery to fix it. That was a hell of an experience itself. Story 3. Not getting enough sleep. My sleep disorder has prevented me from countless nights of good sleep my entire life. I'm a pretty high-functioning person career-wise, but I often wonder what I would have been able to accomplish if I weren't exhausted all the damn time. I went 52 hours without sleep while writing my dissertation to meet a deadline. I wanted to be in the June graduation ceremonies, though I could have graduated by mail at any time. I started hallucinating that people were walking beside me in my peripheral vision, and I could hear background music when there was nothing. Ended up going through crazy mood swings too. After all that, my brain was just never the same. I lost so much cognitive function. Looking back on some of the coursework, I can't imagine how I knew any of it. I struggled with chronic insomnia since childhood. Thank you for childhood long-term trauma. Now in my late 20s, I just had a baby and it was worse than ever. She would sleep nearly 8 hours a night and I would sleep 3 to 4. It was awful. I've taken rounds and rounds of different prescription meds and met with several therapists. I decided to cut out caffeine as a last resort. With a new baby at home, going no caffeine hurt, but the detox was so worth it. I wouldn't say my sleep is perfect now, but I track my sleep on my watch, and I'm getting an average of 8 hours a night, and I'm able to actually fall asleep for naps, so I get another hour or 2 there. If you haven't tried cutting out caffeine, I highly suggest it. I never realized how sensitive I was. The sleep issues came before I started drinking coffee. As a 4th grader, I would fall asleep on my desk at school, and after my teacher called home, my mom started giving me coffee to help me stay awake. Sleeping better than I have in the last 20 years. I will never go back. My son was born 9 years ago, and he was a terrible sleeper. Shortly after falling pregnant with my daughter, her dad and I split up, and so I've been a sole parent for the last 5 years. She is also a terrible sleeper. Even now, she still wants to sleep with me and tosses and turns and kicks and yells at night. Aside from the 4 nights they spend at their dad's every 3 weeks, I haven't slept properly for 9 years. I genuinely feel dumber than 10 years ago. I'm a university graduate, and I'm writing a thesis. I can't even imagine doing that now. Not to mention I'm always tired and always grumpy. Lack of sleep sucks. Story 4. Listening to music way too loud with headphones on when younger. Definitely leads to hearing loss and hearing aids. Not just this, but loud environments with no ear protection. Worked in bars for years, but my first bar job did the damage because the band/speakers would always be put just to the right of, but immediately next to the bar, and I've had tinnitus in my right ear since I was in my mid-20s, and I left the job. After that, I would always wear plugs, but the damage was done. Lesson: protect your ears, people. I feel like ear shape/makeup is a huge part of this, cause I've got super hard, inflexible ears that aren't very outward projecting, and I've been listening to hyper-loud music since cassette mixtape days, and my hearing's great. I can still hear frequencies that are supposed to have dropped off at my age, and my hearing hasn't degraded in 10 years. I have to get annual hearing tests as part of my job, and I'm still at the baseline established when I was hired. Also, don't wear ear pro in required areas, and it doesn't bother me, and yet my wife and all my friends can't handle a concert or the wind from the windows down in the car without ear pain and going half deaf for a week. Story 5. Bad posture/rounding shoulders to minimize my chest. Now I have neck pain, shoulder pain, lower back pain. Ugh. I had a reduction in '03. I had to fight my husband at the time because he liked my size, but I was in pain every minute of every day. It took me 5 more years to get away from him, but it started with me deciding that reduction was for my health and comfort. It helped me take back who I was. I've never looked back. Best decision of my life. Same. I've been assaulted, and it took years of PT before one of the PT experts actually told me to get therapy for the emotional part of the trauma. Because how unsafe I felt in the world after that was evidently causing me to adopt this protective posture. She was right. I tried out having an open posture with shoulders squared for just a few seconds and felt like crying because it felt so vulnerable. Therapy did help. Not saying it's the case for everyone with this, but it was for me. I had the same issue. I still do. My shoulders have been stuck in a forward position, and I have been going to Pilates, and it's changed my life. The shoulder and chest work it provides is low impact. People are saying to hit the weights, but do not do this until you have fixed your posture and form, or else you will destroy your shoulders. If you want any advice, hit me up. I've spent the last 2 years fixing it, and mine was horrendous. The Pilates instructor was concerned. I had to get massages to release my SCM in my neck. Again, hit me up if you want any advice at all. Poor posture is underrated. Last year, I started experiencing severe pain in my neck and shoulders after a long road trip. Tried physical therapy, but it wasn't resolved. The MRI showed I was born with an abnormally narrow spinal canal. My spinal cord is right up against my left side between my C5 and C7 vertebrae. And right in the middle of that, there was a bulging disc. It was impinging my C6 nerve and pushing against where my spinal cord is at its most narrow. I had to get a corticosteroid epidural. Thankfully, it healed and I've been pain-free since, but all the doctors said it was caused by years of poor posture, holding my neck forward that caused the bulging disc. Story 6. Depression is one hell of a thing. People don't get it until they do. It's hard watching friends fade because they stop buying excuses. Trying to rebuild when feeling okay is an uphill battle. Most folks went on their way and didn't care to look back. One friend said it's mourning the living dead. They can't trust that I'm going to be around and won't disappear again, and quite frankly, I can't trust it either. Sometimes it helps to just have mostly friends who also have mental illness. Some of us disappear for a few weeks or months, and that's okay because we still check in and let the others know that we're there for them. One such in our group is a registered nurse working nights who struggles with low-level depression. So sometimes it takes months to see him again outside of sending a few memes. I just found the proper treatment for severe MDD coupled with PMDD about 5 months ago. My life had been changed. I told my therapist I feel like my outlook on life now is akin to those who survive an illness with a nearly terminal diagnosis and felt silly about it because it was just depression. My therapist very bluntly told me my depression would have likely been terminal for me due to how many attempts I had and the severity of it. I never knew I could live like this, and now being on the other side of it, but holy crap, I have so much to do now to recover from it physically and in my day-to-day life. A decade of not thinking I'd see another birthday, I'm 32, will really do a doozy on literally every facet of your life, and nobody talks about the serious grief that comes along with being on the other side of it either. Story 7. Grief. Lost both folks in the span of 6 months. I look like an entirely different person now. For a while, I looked like I ate an entirely different person, but I've been working on that. Grief is a beast. Grief and menopause together are a recipe for whatever this is. I have to be so careful when a loved one dies. I get so overwhelmed with grief that it will trigger migraines, vomiting, broken blood vessels in my eyes, terrible pain from muscle tension. I hate that it makes me so sick at times when so much needs to be done after someone dies, and I'm still relatively young and pretty healthy. I'm terrified of this psychological response when I get older and more fragile. I feel like it's going to be the death of me one day. Story 8. I was a college athlete. We were told that pain was temporary, but pride was forever. I've had 3 orthopedic surgeries, one of which wasn't successful, and from which I went septic. I was diagnosed with arthritis before I was 20. My knees are shot. I have more cracks, pops, and stiffness than people 10 plus years older than me. As it turns out, the pain is forever and comes with compounding interest. It's sickening how high school and college athletes are pushed through injuries just so a coach can gloat or a college can get their best money. I wish college sports scholarships would literally not be a thing. 9 times out of 10, the athlete isn't even interested in college and is stuck with injury and debt afterwards. As a current collegiate baseball player, I'm quietly terrified of what my body's health is going to look like down the line. While I'm able to function perfectly normally now, I'm sure if you put my elbow under an MRI, there's plenty of fraying going on in my UCL. Hell, when I warm up, my elbow has to crack at least once before my arm can feel good. The body just isn't meant to throw as hard and often as is asked of players, and it's only getting worse at younger and younger ages. I'd have to double check, but I believe the statistic is that if a kid is throwing over 8 months out of the year, they are 4 times as likely to tear their UCL than a kid who takes at least 4 months off of the year. It's crazy how much they push young children to train and give absolutely no rest or recovery plans, just relying on our young bodies to heal themselves. It's literally ice for 20 minutes or cycling on a stationary bike while practicing is going on. I have such bad joints from all the high-impact sports from 15 years ago that I have to do PT consistently so I can make sure it doesn't get worse. Hopefully kids nowadays will use YouTube and other free resources to stay on top of their muscle and joint health. Absolutely, and it's a serious issue at much lower skill levels and ages too. The number of recreational B-level players under 16 with broken bones, head trauma, dislocations, and restorative and reparative surgeries required is staggering. Never mind the coaches. I will not be shocked at the parents allowing this to continue after their child's first serious injury, or upon seeing other kids' repeated injuries. In our comfortable first world countries, we tisk counties that allow kids to be sent to work in potentially risky conditions at younger ages. Isn't it worse to send kids into dangerous sports just for fun? Story 9. Working out. I was a skinny, tiny woman, constantly harassed and/or assaulted by men. Not because I was attractive, but because I looked easy to overcome. I got so tired of fighting, screaming, and what happened when I lost, that I got a book by Arnie, a bench, and a simple dumbbell set, and decided I was not going to stop until I weighed 45 kilos, or 100 pounds. I only made it 30 years later when menopause kicked in, but by that time I was addicted to being fit, strong, and confident. Now I'm 75 and, aside from some arthritis, as physically capable as most people 30 years younger, and I feel great. I'm a big woman. I'm tall. I have a lot of natural, untrained muscle and carry a bit of extra weight. I run 10 miles a week on an elliptical, do a bit of core routine, and skip rope. I'm tired of people thinking I'm a fighter and fighting me. I've been assaulted just trying to get a burger for wearing a mask. I have immune issues. I want to get strong so that the next person who steps in gets what's coming to them, a slap in the mouth. What book did you pick up? My starting book was Arnie and Lisa's Body Shaping for Women. I would not recommend that today. It was written in the late 70s, and we know a lot more now than we did then about the physiology of exercise. I do have a copy of The Big Book of Exercises, I kid you not, as a reference for both techniques, to be sure I'm doing things right, and to find alternatives when an exercise stops being what I need for that part of the body. By the way, the Big Book of Exercises comes in both men's and women's editions. These are identical except for the line drawings and the gender pronouns. There is no one-size-fits-all. My recommendation would be to peruse the bookstore and/or online to find something that suits your reading/learning style. However, given your aim, I'd consider spending some time with a beginner's boxing coach to get set up with a routine that gives you power in the shoulders, arms, and the technique you need to avoid accidentally injuring yourself. If you can't afford that, then look for books on boxing for beginners. And good luck, sister. May the next moron who thinks she or he has some say in how you live your life end up with a dislocated mandible. Story 10. Dating the wrong person. Same. My face was constantly bloated. I put on so much weight, and I always looked tired and dull. Now my skin glows and I've lost a bit of weight, especially in my face. I actually have cheekbones and I lost my double chin. I feel so much lighter and happier too, much more confident. This is the one. When I was with my ex, I had to be on antipsychotics for the stress-induced psychosis I was experiencing. Constant nausea to the point that I lost 30 pounds in less than 2 months, self-medicating with weed and alcohol, and tried to kill myself twice. The literal day after he moved out, I woke up not nauseous for the first time in months, made myself a proper breakfast and wolfed it down like a starved animal. A few weeks after that, I tapered off my antipsychotics and tossed my stashes. 2 years later, I'm with an incredibly empathetic, kind man, and I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I haven't had a single suicidal thought in a long time. Exercise regularly, eat well, and have a normal relationship with alcohol. If you're in a toxic or abusive relationship, either they will eventually kill you or the stress will. At the end of 2023, I got out of a terrible toxic 4+ year-long relationship. Within this year, I've lost 60 pounds, my acne has gotten better, my sleep is much better, I feel more energetic and become much less introverted. My friends tell me the difference between me now and me a year ago is astonishing, and I don't even feel or look like the same person. And this is the happiest they've ever seen me. I didn't even realize how beaten down and lifeless I was until 6 months after the breakup, just how bad it was for me to be in that relationship and how much of my spirit I lost. Story 11. The dentist had to yank out a wisdom tooth. The yank somehow damaged my jaw. The jaw is now permanently pressed upwards and has pushed stuff around, so it impacts most of the right side of my face. My jaw now pops on that side. I've lost about 60% of my hearing in that ear, and I get massive dizzy spells now. That was 25 years ago. I was sent to an oral surgeon for some minor facial swelling. The office had this kind of shady feeling to it, like they rented an old law office and did no redecorating. I walked back to the exam room and it literally looked like they had just stored crap in there. There was a chair in the middle of the room, no overhead swivel light, no x-ray equipment, nothing. The dude walks in with a light tied to his head and examines me. Turns out the facial swelling was nothing serious, but he immediately started trying to get me to yank my wisdom teeth, which came in straight years ago, and I hadn't had issues with, nor did my dentist send me there for. Oh, you'll probably be back in here eventually. Want to just pull these now? I felt off and left the office without him doing any work, looked up reviews online and saw several about his shoddy work, including one person who had a tooth pulled by him and he left the root in, which caused all sorts of issues they had to have fixed later. Having read those reviews and your story, really freaking glad I didn't let him pull anything. Hope that you can get this fixed in the future. Story 12. Bad posture. I sit like a shrimp and get shooting back pains now. Being 6'7", I know your pain. First, just lay on the floor and let yourself relax. Put your hands on your lower ribs with your elbows out and just relax. Try to meditate or do rhythmic breathing. Good chance that you're going to feel your vertebrae moving around as you do this. This is from 2 things: muscles relax and then move, taking stress out of your back. It feels weird and can be uncomfortable, but it's part of the process. Second, push your heels toward the wall. This will stretch your lower back and have the same effect. Third, while pushing your heels or separating, clasp your hands together with your arms stretched in front of your face and let them fall over your head. This will have the same effect as the first. The eventual goal is to have your hands touch the floor over your head. This can take a while, several sessions. There is more if you want me to go further. More info. If you sleep on your side, try a couple nights of sleeping with your back and legs straight. Find a way you can hang from your hands and let the gravity work on your back. While you are on your back with your hands above your head, try to do a crunch. This should make your thoracic vertebrae decompress and make a bunch of noise. It may actually hurt initially, but it will feel better almost immediately. Story 13. A few years of CrossFit have left me with permanent knee and shoulder pain. Heavy weights shouldn't be lifted for time. Your form inevitably goes to hell and you set yourself up for joint injuries. I used to go to a CF gym. I saw it as having a personal trainer for a quarter of the cost. I frustrated them because they'd tell us to do like 100 deadlifts for time, and I'd go at my own pace and finish whenever the clock ran out. Never got injured, but saw some people wreck their crap because they didn't stop and think that maybe they shouldn't be speeding through a complex compound lift just because a 22-year-old guy told them to. I have lifted weights for years, including heavy steroid usage and competitive powerlifting. In the 198 pounds body weight division, I had a 405 bench, 575 squats, and 615 deadlifts. 95% of my injuries in my 12 years of training happened during the 2 years during CrossFit. Also, I can point out anyone that does CrossFit. It ruins their physique. Instead of a V-cut, they have massive cores that make them look like squares with limbs and a head. Story 14. Obstructive sleep apnea. When you already know you have some mental troubles, you think that explains your drowsiness and low mood and don't look for more issues. It does not only hurt your cardiovascular system, it may slowly destroy your life. If you are overweight or obese, snore at night, or feel sleepy all day, go see your doctor. I traveled with a friend with sleep apnea, and sharing a hotel room with him pretty much guaranteed I'd sleep a grand total of 2 hours because he'd spend the entire night choking and making awful noises. I woke him up a couple of times on the trip because it was like, dude, you sound like you're dying. He didn't realize how bad it was until a doctor suggested a sleep study. His blood oxygen levels got into the high 70s during the study, and his doctor said if you were one of my hospitalized patients and I saw those numbers, you would be intubated. He ended up getting a CPAP machine after that and sleeps way better. I shared a hotel room with him in the 2003 and he was totally silent the entire night. When I went to a sleep clinic, I found out an apnea was a unit of measure for an event where you stop breathing. The most severe category for sleep apnea started at 35 apneas per hour. I was averaging 70. More than once per minute, I stopped breathing at night. I got a CPAP when I was 32. Apnea had started in middle school. Until that time, I thought I needed 12 hours to be well rested. My sleep doctor said I probably would have had a stroke by 40. I'm 38 now and feel great after 7 hours. I suspected I had this a couple of years ago. I fell asleep at work every day. Went to a sleep doctor and he said I was too young and too female to have sleep apnea. Found a second doctor who immediately tested me. My oxygen output was dropping an average of 6 times an hour. Got fitted for a mouth appliance that shifts my jaw at night. I have a big tongue too, and it made a world of difference. Story 15. Getting bitten by a tick. Now I have chronic fatigue and nerve damage as a result of Lyme infection. Father got Lyme 3 separate times, totally destroyed his nervous system. It was insane watching the strongest man in the world struggle to crawl upstairs to his bedroom or cry in pain because it hurt so bad to walk for years. Lyme is evil. One of my former coworkers' wives got bit by a Lone Star tick and contracted alpha-gal syndrome, and their life has been a living hell ever since. She gets violently ill ingesting anything with animal proteins, and they found out the hard way what random, seemingly innocent products still had some kind of animal proteins, like the gel caps that make pills. That's what happened to me. Bit by a tick in Maine, so I initially only worried about Lyme. But over time, all my joints started to ache like crazy, and I'd get so tired in the afternoons, I'd almost fall asleep driving home from work. I'd feel like passing out in the shower every morning, and I'd get horrible stomach pains randomly, or so I thought. It took me almost a full year and 2 anaphylactic episodes to finally get an allergist. where I self-diagnosed, and he did the tests to confirm alpha-gal. Now I can't have anything with mammals, and my biggest fear is having a stroke or other medical emergency and they give me heparin or some other medicine that can kill me. I wear a medical alert bracelet, but I know from my paramedic son that most of them don't know what alpha-gal is, so they don't have any way to know all the ingredients of meds, and my bracket isn't big enough to list them all. Story 16. Being kept 100% out of the sun as a kid. I wasn't getting vitamin D supplements either, so my bones are pretty fragile and break easily, and my enamel is delicate and shears off if my teeth close too hard. My body never sequestered calcium properly as a kid, and there's nothing I can do about it as an adult. My mom thought she was protecting me from skin cancer, but she was really dooming me to a life of bone fractures and bad teeth. Story 17. Acne. I thought it was something that would go away after your teens, but it's still destroying my face, a decade later, and nothing seems to work. It's most likely genetic, since the other women in my family still suffer from it. Even if there was a cure, I'd still have the permanent scarring, since dark skin tends to scar worse than light skin. I know it seems minor compared to what others said here, but people aren't as kind to those with messed up faces. Same, my biggest problem is dehydrated skin. High altitude living, yay. But then I also scratch at it, which makes it way worse by irritating it and adding whatever bacteria and yeast are in my hands. Do you know what helps mine though? Occasionally washing my face with dandruff shampoo. It kind of acts like a reset button for the bacteria and yeast problems. I agree, people trivialize the effects of acne because most people go through it at some point, but long-term adult acne can seriously screw you up. My mom has had it all her life into menopause. It seriously affects my sense of self. People take for granted that they wake up and know that they will look the same they did the day before. I don't have that consistency. I don't know what I will look like until I look in the mirror. I have to accept that it's the first thing people will notice when they see me, and it's probably the one defining feature they will use to pick me out in a crowd. It just sucks.
What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? I brought up a company's awful Glassdoor reviews, and they got so mad they ended the interview. Well, guess I dodged that bullet. This is good practice for any interview. Ask them the hard and real questions and see how they respond. It's always a disgruntled ex-employee who wasn't a team player. I know, I've asked, didn't take the job. When you ask, what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live instead of the actual job. Tagging on to that, I saw another Redditor post to ask, tell me about your most successful employee in this position, and listen to what they say. Sometimes it's more telling than the straightforward cues of like hours and such. We value our employees' family time, but then when answering the cue about their most successful employee may talk about a person who stayed late all the time, etc. Means they really don't care about your personal time. This is seriously fantastic advice. This actually happened to me. Interviewer, do you have any questions for us? Me, what is a challenge this department has recently faced? Interviewer, job security. How do you even answer after that? Just, okay, and walk away? Yes, or take the gig and know it's short term if the gamble is right for you. I didn't know it at the time, but you'll be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. That's a non-profit motto if I ever heard one. It's also a tech startup motto. I once turned down a job offer because they mentioned that the previous person in the position had quit after a few months, and most of the people I interviewed with seemed stressed out. I should have taken this advice, but I was so desperate to get out of retail. Mind telling us the story? You are required to wear clothing that has the company logo. You must purchase it yourself, from the company. This is illegal in most US states, unknown outside the US. Wait, really? This happened to me in Ohio. They also said I had to give it back. I didn't. You'll get full-time hours but won't be full-time. AKA, we'll do everything in our power to avoid giving you benefits, even though we have you working more than 40 hours in a week. I once worked in a grocery store under a union hired part-time. Consistently was scheduled 40 hours a week until the 3rd week of the month, then I worked 39 hours that week. It kept them from giving me benefits. You should be considered full-time at 35 hours. I came in for a job interview at 7:30 p.m. The entire staff was still in the office. Should have known right then that 9 to 5 was not ever going to happen. One day I worked until 2:30 a.m. to finish up a big project, and my boss said to me I could come in an hour later the next morning. Gee, thanks bro. With my public transport and travel time, that gives me a solid 2 hours of sleep instead of just 1. I've come in at 4 in the morning to find people still in the office from the day before. No matter how much money is offered, I categorically tell recruiters to go screw themselves when they send me never-ending amazing opportunities. I will never go back to that life. I hate when I make an argument like this to people and their only answer is, "But it's money." I don't care about the money if I'm going to be suicidal over it. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, "Oh, she's not here today," in a tone that suggested I should have somehow already known that. She said that they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable Monday through Wednesday, but could come in anytime Thursday or Friday. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay and went on to my other interviews and ended up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello? I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was canceled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow. I would be livid. Definitely shows a complete disregard for your time. What could you do though? I've had similar situations twice over many years. The first, they apologized and explained the need to reschedule, which was fair enough, an annoying pain but unavoidable. The second, they didn't give a crap and somehow made it all my fault for them literally forgetting I was coming in that Monday, so they went on a long weekend holiday. Other than sending in a complaint, what really could be done? We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed. Expecting more work for no extra pay. Getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. Well then you won't mind if I come in at 9:30. You're not watching the clock after all. They don't like it when you watch the clocks. Their clock watching is only natural, of course. Everyone looks tired. Also, you don't see anyone in your department before working in it other than the boss. Making this mistake a few times was the worst job. During my last semester in nursing school, I went ahead and started applying for jobs. One was on a neuro floor, adults, at a local hospital. Interestingly enough, my own neurologist worked at that hospital. Anyway, the posting showed shift 3, 12s, which is what I wanted. I got a call to interview 2 days after applying. When I got on the floor, everyone looked absolutely exhausted. However, the part that bothered me was that no one said hi or smiled when I introduced myself. They just ignored me while I was waiting on the supervisor. I interviewed her as well as 3 other nurses on the floor. There was a desperation in their faces, and I think they were hoping this new grad would be grateful for a job. However, the supervisor told me the position was actually night shift. I explained that I could not do that for several reasons. Sleep deprivation equals seizures for me. She said, "No worries, we'll just change it to day shift. You can go ahead and start after graduation," even before I took the NCLEX. Suspicious. I got a call the next day with an offer. I actually did accept though, but I ended up changing my mind. The day before graduation, another job on another neuro floor, different hospital, was offered to me. More money and a sign-on bonus. My FIL also applied to a hospital and got to the interview, and they changed the work schedule from what it was listed as in the job posting. I don't understand that behavior, other than that they are hoping to trick people into working a schedule they didn't want. He went from a Monday to Friday 9 to 5 to alternating nights and weekends. He did not accept the job. Employees are either new hires or have been there for 15 plus years with no in-between. There is no room for improvement. It's better to leave for advancement. There are 1 or 2 exceptions to this. I've been at companies where you have the 20-plus year veterans who love what they do and refuse to move up, so you have a young crowd before they move up and an old grizzled veteran crowd. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that just sign here and so on. I was working with an indie game studio as a modeler and a texture artist. It was just for fun and making contacts. The game we were working on started picking up traction and had studios looking to pick us up. The lead on the project immediately got together with an attorney and drafted up contracts. Not a problem. I got mine, but there wasn't a rush, and since I had to do regular work for bills, I kind of ignored it for a couple days. The lead and his attorney started bombarding me with emails telling me to sign it. I replied, "After I read it, I'll let you know." I immediately got a phone call from the attorney assuring me it was all just standard stuff, and if I wanted to secure my position in the studio, I should just sign it. Red flags everywhere. So when I had time, I read it and I'm glad I did. It stated that anything I worked on in my personal time, which I did a lot of as an artist, was their property, and I had no right to even show it. If I left the studio for any reason, I couldn't work in the video games industry for a minimum of 12 months. Even though I was working for free, I was not allowed to take a paid position at any other game studio while working with them. The list went on. I told them I wasn't going to sign that, and if they pressed, I was leaving. They pressed, and I left. Find later that the lead started the studio, hired people, then drained the accounts, sold the hardware, locked the doors, and never returned. Had an online interview with a company a few years ago, was interviewed by the regional manager, which seemed like a normal interview. Halfway through, he let slip that there were 6 other people from his company watching and listening in, but the software wasn't set up so I could not see or hear them. And he actually got a kick out of telling me this. It was like being on a first date with someone and finding out later she had a hidden camera on her and her parents, and 6 other family members were watching the whole time. I'm like, yeah, no, screw that noise. I know it's easy to say this stuff when it's not your reality, but I'd like to think I'd chew them all out and hang the screw up. The nerve. You can tell places to get screwed in a reasonably professional manner. I think it's an important responsibility for people to do that when they have the luxury of choosing employers, because most people don't and can't. I was once told, sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running, but management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. The question was subtle red flags? Jumping on the not-so-subtle train here, about a month ago I interviewed for a position to run the office of a lawn or landscape company in my town. When I arrived, in-person interview, I waited at the receptionist's desk. A man wheeled out of the office in his desk chair and said to the receptionist, "Got a resume or anything for this one?" Meaning me. He literally looked at my resume for the first time sitting in front of me. He then started asking questions. Never introduced himself, no "Hi, how are you? Thanks for coming in," etc. He interviewed me while I was sitting at the receptionist's desk, and the receptionist sitting there working. If she took a call, he just paused until she was through. He repeatedly referred to his landscape crew as my Mexicans, and when I politely ended the interview, he said, "Well, if you want, you can call on Friday to ask if we want you back for a second interview." Bro, no. When they tell you, "What I'm paying you stays between you and me, don't discuss pay with anyone else," usually means that they are trying to pay you less than your coworkers who do the same job and don't want you to know. This happened to my husband. He had been with the company for about 2 years and they hired another employee. Told my husband he got a raise and wasn't to tell anyone else. Turns out his raise was equal to new hire pay. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face, with the caption, "I spoke with boss's name about it, and I guess we're still doing it." That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work that they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I ever had. There's a good saying, people often don't quit jobs, they quit managers. I first saw this on Reddit, and I can't agree any harder that this is an indisputable truth. But I also feel that your leaders at the top set a precedent for all staff under their charge. I was once part of a group onboarding for an IT job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract, and everyone except me signed it immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included, "I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy," attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the HR drone said, "Okay, I guess this person is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much." After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that HR reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. I was asked to sign a contract that gave the employer full access to my medical records. It was supposedly for drug testing, but worded badly. I signed every other page and got the job. Would have been very interesting if they felt like drug testing me and they weren't able to do it. Maybe I'm just paranoid, but I would expect them to anyways, regardless of what you did or didn't sign. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple of positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what, which led to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like, you won't be able to either. I was interviewed for a job like this. When I walked into the interview, it was made clear that the job was being offered and was mine if I wanted it, on my credentials alone. It was a library supervisor job at a rare items and fine arts library. An hour into the interview, despite asking several times, they couldn't tell me what I would be doing. Slowly, it came out that there were frequent fights in the library that I would need to break up, and student mental breakdowns I would somehow have to handle as a mental health professional. The kicker was that the library held a lot of fine art, and I would need to stop people from literally stealing the Warhols. They wanted a librarian, who I guess was somehow Batman. I got an email that the position was dissolved 6 months later. Haha! Sounds like you narrowly avoided being the protagonist of a sequel to Night at the Museum. Not getting to speak with who your direct manager will be. A game room or ping pong table is advertised as a perk. The blatant overuse of buzzwords about your profession is clearly written by someone with no clue. People seem tired. Not sure about the game room or ping pong table. We tend to make sure interviewees see our wall of tabletop games and Nerf gun battles. The presence of games or fun isn't a huge turnoff, but presenting it as a perk really can be. It comes off as enforced, the company mandated fun, of a very specific type. It's like the PG-rated version of we all get smashed at Jim's sports bar after work. It's pretty awkward too. Foosball and ping pong tables and board games require 2 people with a certain amount of overlapping free time. At the last place I worked in one of these game rooms, there were hundreds of people working in the building. Most of us only had 15-minute breaks, pretty strictly enforced, and they were staggered to the point where you couldn't always be guaranteed a break with your friend. Out of the hundreds of people working there, I only ever saw 4 people total ever use the games room, all of whom were pretty high up, and thus weren't on the same break schedule, though most of the higher-up people with longer breaks also didn't have the right schedule to use the ping pong table or play Settlers of Catan. It's not like multiple managers can just all screw off at once. That job wasn't a bad one at all, but it always amazed me that they pointed to a room full of games that I couldn't really use as a perk of the job. Even in workplaces without such strict break schedules, are there really enough people with similar interests and close enough relationships doing nothing for a long enough time to make use of all these games? The idea of Nerf gun battles at work horrifies me. Do people actually use them and enjoy that? When they feel the need to reassure you in the interview that at that company they work hard but also play hard. They don't play hard. It's a sweatshop and they're just trying to convince that it's anything but one. 100%. Work hard, play hard translates to a minimum of 50 hours a week, but you can use our games room because we totally have one. If they seem too relieved that someone actually showed up for the interview. I just had an interview last week where they showed up 30 minutes late because they weren't expecting me to show up after the first 3 hires never came to work. Tried to hire me on spot and wanted me to work in a different department than what I applied for. Makes you wonder if they told the missing hires to show up somewhere else. Maybe they're actually still working for the company in the other department. We work hard and we play hard. Translation, you will work 60+ hours a week. You will be expected to work late nights and early mornings. People will treat this job like their whole life. We'll also underpay you. It may look like a decent salary, but when you back it out to hourly, it's not even remotely competitive with industry standards. But we have kegs and a ping pong table. Also, if everyone who interviews you has been there less than 2 years, it's a sign that they can't retain good employees. Thursday night half-price appetizers at Applebee's with coworkers is your social life. It's true then, there really are some fates worse than death. When they ask out of nowhere what clients can you bring with you, I interviewed with MetLife Insurance about 20 years ago. They demanded that I provide them with a contact list of no fewer than 100 friends and family. I noped out of that quickly. Last job I worked. Yeah, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back, so bring your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. They're afraid you'll never come back. Is so funny to me. Is the boss a dog? If they're always hiring, constant staff turnover means people quit a lot, so it must be crap. The opposite can be true as well. I worked at a place where most of the staff had been working together for over 25 years. Don't take the job. They have their jobs and work dynamic right where they want them. They will be an unbreakable clique and will be impervious to change. The bosses will have zero control of them, and you will be on the outs constantly. Been there. It is healthy for a company to have a 5-year turnover on most jobs. Yeah, I experienced this exact same thing. Went to work someplace where I was the first new hire in about 10 years. They treated me like an outsider all the time. One guy even made a point of getting a cake for everybody when it was his birthday except for me, right in front of everyone. When I tried to join in conversations, they treated me rather cold. 0 out of 10 would not recommend it. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said, ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut the pay offer, I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I feel like that would put a lot of pressure on the employee to not say anything to dissuade an applicant and upset management. Yeah, 1, they'd never pick me to talk to you, and 2, they'd pick the person who will kiss ass and lie. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything, and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen because they didn't even try to hide it. Since when is it legal to have employees working and not paying them? What a psycho. In America, we have the freedom to strong-arm our employees into working unpaid overtime. It truly is the land of liberty and justice for all. Do you have a strong personality? Meant everyone else who worked there were raging idiots who I literally got into massive shouting matches with and quit over within 6 months of having started. The money was good, but no thank you. Had a job like that. They said at least 5 times, if you don't have thick skin, you won't make it. City job detailed turned into everyone crapping on everyone's family. One dude was constantly made fun of for his wife leaving him. Another dude made fun of because his kid was gay. Another guy made fun of for always ending up in short relationships. I flipped crap numerous times and had to talk to HR. Decided to quit after considering following a worker home to beat the crap out of him because he'd always say, I can say whatever I want if I'm on the clock, I'm protected by management. The job was a freaking joke. Great pay and benefits to essentially be everyone's verbal punching bag. Ugh, just the worst. One example from mine was I was being asked to add another task onto my already huge workload and I didn't know how to do it. So I asked, can you please show me how to do it? Her response, just do your frickin' job. I didn't do it. Then I told our general manager that these things were happening and he put us in a room together where she then lied and said she didn't. I went on stress leave a few days later. Rode that out for several months and then quit. My actual manager was a great dude. He quit not long after me and gave me a pat on the back when I told them all to go frick themselves before leaving. I also went to the labor board because they hadn't paid me $4,000 in overtime. They tried to force me to sign a non-disclosure agreement and I laughed and told them to give me a check. They did. It was fricked up, but I learned a lot about myself. What do you miss about the 90s? Before we had mobile phones, my wife and I would plan to meet at a certain street corner at a certain time after work. We sometimes had to wait for the other person to show up, but we knew they would. Reminds me of a time when my family and I got split up during a graduation ceremony, not mine, and we couldn't find each other. This was before cell phones were common. So half of us ended up going to a steak dinner and the other half ordered pizza at the house waiting for the other half to show up. Good times, good times. Around the 2010s, I had a boyfriend that did not have a cell phone. Once we got separated at a big event downtown, we ended up meeting at the nearest bookstore or comic book store, without discussing it before. Where would they go to wait? Of course, there. There was a period between the Cold War and the War on Terror when it seemed like there was hope for the world. This exactly. Too young to have been worried much by the Cold War, 9/11 was years away, good music on the radio, that was the sweet spot. 9/11 was one of those watershed historical moments that truly did change everything afterwards. So many of the problems that we're dealing with now, geopolitics, the surge of right-wing media, internet issues in general, privacy concerns, the us versus them mentality, and increased political polarization can be traced back to that day, or were greatly exasperated by it. Blockbuster, Pizza Hut on Friday nights. Stack of VHSs, 2-liter of Barks, and an extra large pepperoni. God, I miss being a kid. My parents would always rent a movie, and they'd let me rent a game. We'd walk to Pizza Hut, place our order, then walk to the brand new Blockbuster and browse. It was amazing as a kid. I remember they had an N64 kiosk in the middle, and I actually begged my parents to let me stay and play Star Fox 64. Got it for Christmas that year and played it all night into the morning. I fell asleep at my grandma's house at the table during Christmas dinner that night. Haha, good times, man. The 80s was Cold War paranoia, and the 2000s was terrorist paranoia after 9/11. The 90s was this oasis of calm in between two paranoid decades. The end of history. Turns out history likes a lot of crazy twists in its endings. Not being contactable 24/7, the peace of leaving school or work and not having to deal with their nonsense until tomorrow. That became an issue with my work when we went remote because of COVID. They set it up so that we could install the mobile versions of our email and chat apps on our personal phones and forward our desk phones to them. It was a welcome convenience during work hours, as there were times we weren't at our laptops when someone was trying to contact us, but it also left us vulnerable to being reached 24/7. And it's not like I could just silence my phone because I don't have a landline. I ended up buying a budget Android with the cheapest prepaid plan I could find to use specifically for work tasks. Sucks that it's not on my work's dime, but definitely worth paying to keep my personal phone personal. Might be able to write that off on your taxes. That Friday afternoon after school feeling, when you knew you had 2 glorious days before you had any responsibility again. So you'd call your friends on the landline and hope their parents didn't pick it up so it wouldn't be awkward, and you'd get together and just go outside. That was it. There was no plan, but maybe somebody would bring a football and you'd have a pickup game at the park. I honestly miss the internet from the 90s. I spent so many hours exploring and reading things, every webpage felt like I was visiting someone's house, and they were so personal as design standards did not exist yet. I enjoyed my Netscape Navigator, and I loved my IRC chat rooms. Keep in mind I was like 9 and 10, so mostly I spent time in Pokemon chat rooms that had bots. Discord is not the same as the IRC days. GeoCities. The pages would take forever to load because of the complete nonsense, but it was awesome. 36 GIFs and an autoplay 20-second loop of music, just to see someone express about their favorite rock. Sign my guest book, please! Watching grunge music videos on MTV and Keebler chips. Alice in Chains interviews and Unplugged Live. God damn, those were the real crap. Coming home stoned and watching 120 Minutes and Liquid TV and discovering new cool music and weird videos? Heck yeah. We didn't live online yet. The internet was in its infancy and was a fun way to pass the time, but it hadn't consumed us. The business was still being done in brick-and-mortar stores. Our social lives were offline, etc. There was almost nothing to be purchased online, other than the online bookstore called Amazon. Pretty cool because they had a bigger inventory than you could fit in a building. And so it began. My cousin got me a $50 gift card for Amazon for my 14th birthday in 1998, and I made my first ever online purchase of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy Omnibus from Amazon. Still have it on my bookshelf. Those were simpler times. Air travel? Holy crap, I missed the 90s air travel. Did you know that before 9/11, it wasn't a massive pain in the ass to go anywhere? Loved ones could walk you right up to the gate, you could bring snacks, sandwiches, and drinks onto the plane with you. The prices at Hudson News were perfectly reasonable because if they weren't, you could just walk out of the terminal and grab something. You never had to take your shoes off for anything. In fact, it used to be rude to take your shoes off at the airport. That's completely 180'd. I used to fly 3 or 4 times a year and it was usually pretty easy. Now I fly maybe once every 5 years and I absolutely dread it. My local airport used to have a viewing tower people could chill in. Even if you weren't traveling, you could just go watch. That's all gone. You could go up to the cockpit and the pilot would give you some wings to pin on your shirt. Now the air marshal tackles you and looks in your butt. My Super Nintendo being cutting-edge technology. Rushing home from school to play Secret of Mana or Final Fantasy III, feeling like a god at your friend's house because you could walk into Bowser's Castle small and win anyway? Man, Final Fantasy is the crap. I was born in '95, but my parents had me when they were 16 or 17, and my dad let me play everything that they had. Final Fantasy and Pokemon taught me how to read and write the way I do now. Building cubby houses, playing in the creek, rollerblading, then coming home and playing Sega or Nintendo. I miss taping stuff off of the TV, hanging out in my room, still playing with toys, reading cool magazines, and going through my card collections, the hype of the cinema back in the 90s, not being a slave to technology but still having wicked gadgets like Walkmans. You just perfectly described my summers in the 90s, like dead on. Going to the mall and hanging out with friends. The malls were awesome, and I hate that the strip mall style has taken over, especially up in Canada, where it gets to -40 in the winter. Back in the day, you could legitimately spend hours wandering the mall, indoors and warm. Now it is depressing. Maybe the big malls like Mall of America or West Edmonton Mall are still okay, but the ones in my city are crap. My mom would drop me off with my friends, and we'd call her from a payphone when we were done. We'd see a movie, play in the arcade, have an Orange Julius, and just hang out in the food court. Sometimes we'd have to scramble to find a quarter for the payphone, checking all of the coin returns in the vending machines, the floor of the arcade, even the fountain if we were desperate. I learned how to do collect calls. "Mom, I'm ready," was my name on those calls for years. This is going to sound depressing, but I was in my teens and had optimistic hopes and dreams for the future, both for myself and for the world in general. It's all been replaced with misanthropy. I'm pessimistic about the future and have very low expectations of what's to come for humans, including myself. I'm 40 and have aged pretty well. My eyes, though. I look in the mirror at myself and can tell that I'm mostly dead inside at this point. The spark is gone. The privacy. I was just a kid or young teenager, but I only knew my best friends intimately. The rest of my class didn't know or care. Now it's like all of your followers are in your bedroom or home when you post to social media, anyway. I can give you the details of the lives of people who I haven't spoken one word to in 17 years, simply because they friended me on Facebook back in 2005. I've started to realize that the best sign of a happy relationship is there is barely any mention of it on social media. I almost said hi to a coworker's husband and son when I saw them out and about running errands one day, and I stopped myself just in time when I realized I'd never met them in person. She just posts pictures of her family on Facebook a lot. Not for myself, but I feel bad for kids who have to experience bullying 24/7. When I was a kid in the 90s, I went to school and these kids made fun of me, but then I went home and it stopped. Now with social media, the bullying can invade kids' lives outside of school. Kind of a tangent, but not having your life invaded outside of home, work, or school was so nice. Most people do not even have cell phones. You had true insulation from society at home or anywhere. Picking out a movie at Blockbuster and good music or movies. Taking an hour at Blockbuster to argue with your friends about what to watch that night. I also love, "What should we do tonight? I don't know, let's stay in and watch a movie." Grabs keys to go to Blockbuster. The effort in getting up and moving off of your couch made the movie more worthwhile, even if it was kind of a crappy movie. The pre-social media days. I feel like there's an almost social expectation for me to be on Facebook now. I specifically chose to delete my account after college, and as a result, I've been out of the loop on so much with my friends from school. My close friends and I text and call, but I've missed a lot by not being on Facebook. I hate it. Why can't people keep in touch by email or phone anymore? I miss when Facebook required a .edu email address. I dropped social media in 2015, left college in 2014, and ran into a similar experience. I would argue 9 out of 10 people I had once affiliated with dropped off the face of the earth. I spoke to my father about it, born in 1952, and he told me that that was life. That's how life works, at least according to this man who at the time still held on to his '07 Blackberries. Suddenly, it made sense to me. Before the internet, which really was not that long ago, you can have a friend leave town and you would never see them again unless you knew where they lived, so you could find that locality's phone book. You could have an embrace with a friend who is moving out of town and never see or hear from them again unless they choose to call or mail you a letter. And that was life. You would wish these people well and a happy life, as after all, you did love them. I got a sense of peace out of what he told me. It's natural to lose people. It's okay. And frankly, I would argue that these aren't even authentic relationships. Most of the quote-unquote relationships held together by social media with the people of our past are superfluous at best. You're not sharing moments with these people. You're not going to new places, laughing over shared experiences, you're not living together, you're not hanging out, you're not even getting coffee, you're just commenting on the same thing. If that's what a relationship is, then I've got a relationship with every news anchor in the world. If a friend I haven't seen or heard from personally in 4 years likes my status, I mean really, who cares? Are they taking a quarter of a second to press their finger against a mouse or screen really the difference between me being in the loop or not? Personally, I don't think so. Recognize those friends and people you truly love, the ones who you want in your life forever, the people who will always have a warm hug and a roof over their head so long as you are around, and go out of your way to reach out to them frequently. A little text message, an occasional meme, a nice phone call. Write down their birthdays and mail them a gift, even if small or silly. Send them a Christmas card and be ridiculous about it. I love mailing postcards to old friends and they love receiving them. A little bit goes a long way, and remember, real relationships take effort. I don't talk with 90% of the people I met in my past, but my friendships with a handful of people have never been stronger. Even as we have all gone our separate ways over the last decade, live nowhere close to each other, and spend less face-to-face time with each other than we ever have before. Good luck. Not being blinded by headlights when driving. Now everyone has LED or illegal lights. This genuinely bothers me too. However, it's probably necessary since no one has changed the bulbs and lampposts since the 90s either. Our city has LEDs in every streetlight, and they're horrible. They spotlight the ground. The light is too cool of color, and if it's raining, it's next to impossible to see the road lines. Go back to the halogen and warm yellowish lights. They cast the light better and are better at illuminating things. It's why shooters wear yellow glasses. Makes things easier to see. The gaming. N64 with GoldenEye, Ocarina of Time, Rogue Squadron. It was my peak computer gaming time too, with hours spent on several Sid Meier, Maxis, and Roller Coaster Tycoon games. It's hard to put a finger on, but it seems like the music in all of its genres was just banging. 90s alternative rock is still amazing. I turned 10 years old in 1990, 16 in 96. The internet was a fun and chill place to be. It felt like a secret sometimes. Most of my IRL friends weren't online, and if they were, it was just AOL. I had a website, did Usenet, and IRC and ICU, and I could be as anonymous as I wanted to be. It felt like such a vast and creative space back then. I haven't felt like that about the internet in a long time. I didn't know the news all day, every day. Oh, and there weren't TVs in every fast food restaurant and bar. Yeah, you'd find TVs in sports bars and doctors' waiting rooms, but they weren't blaring the news 24/7 as they do now. People weren't so obsessed with decorating and redecorating and renovating their houses. I missed the summers when I was in middle school when I would just reread my favorite books and then try to write short stories about some of the characters. I didn't know there was such a thing called fanfic. I miss how there were always some sort of one-off comedy or drama at the movie theater. Not everything was a part of a series or franchise. There were dollar movie theaters, and even at the first-run theater, I could go in the late afternoon or early evening and get the matinee price of $4. I miss seeing Tori Amos, Smashing Pumpkins, Alanis, and Sarah McLachlan for about $30 for a decent seat. I don't miss all the smoke at the concert venue. The quietness before every idiot in the world had access to the internet and a camera phone. My best friend's family had a video camera, and when I went over to hang out, it was like a huge deal to make a funny video. Nobody else I knew had one, so it was very special and such an exciting novelty. Being a child, Pokemon was brand new. Sitting in the Walmart parking lot in my mom's minivan playing Pokemon Yellow with my Game Insider magazine as she shopped inside. A boy named Josh brought in Pokemon cupcakes when I was in first grade, the kind that has the plastic ring with the image stuck on top. I got Charmander, and I remember not giving a crap about the cupcakes themselves, but just being super hyped for the ring. Now my own kid is in first grade, and you're not allowed to send in treats anymore because of both COVID and allergies of the other kids. I'm a Zennial, so being in middle age now, I miss everything about the 90s. I really miss having no true responsibilities but choosing what color jelly shoes to wear that day, or begging my mom to bring me to the store for more stickers for my sticker album. I'm also a Zennial, and it hurts my heart to realize we are middle age, so I'm gonna say the one thing I miss from the 90s is my damn youth. I miss living in a non-monetized life. Presently, I feel if there's a way to charge someone for doing or thinking something or anything, it's been or is being implemented. And screw subscriptions for everything. Exactly. It's all 100% money and hustle culture now. I feel like only rich people do anything just for fun, because normal people can barely afford to, with insane real estate prices, inflation, and saving for retirement, and not wanting to work until I die. Quite frankly, it makes life very unenjoyable. Oh, well, at least I can play soccer. But even there, the cleats are pretty expensive, and wear out much quicker than they used to. Planned obsolescence. Things being reasonably priced. Nowadays, inflation is beyond ridiculous. Even cheap things that are low quality now require some thought and budgeting in order to afford. I remember not wanting to spend over $20 on new jeans, and actually having plenty to choose from without going to the clearance section. Fall into the gap, then buy grass-scented perfume, which why hasn't anyone replaced that? And then go buy some scented nail polish. There was a large goth scene. I liked the goths. All the ones I knew cared for each other, and were good people at heart. Might have a tough exterior, but they were the kind of people you want around when you are feeling unsafe or had a mental health crisis. What is that about? I've noticed this too, that all the goth and punk kids I know are really sensitive and good people when compared to most people. I don't know, maybe I'm being silly, but it's something I can't help but notice. Same with a lot of metalheads. They might have pentagrams and headbang and listen to music about Satan, but they're mostly good, thoughtful, decent people who use metal music as an outlet. The British electronic dance music scene. Early Prodigy is a time capsule. Saw the Prodigy on New Year's Eve, 95 or 96, I think. For a time machine. R.I.P. Keith. People having real fun. I think people are more concerned with posting something and going viral now. I really hate that you can just be minding your business, doing something with family or friends, and enjoying yourself, and somebody will randomly record what you're doing so that they can call you corny and get likes and views. People are too scared to actually let loose and have fun because there's always somebody with a phone, waiting to catch you looking silly while you do anything, so that they can record and post it. Seriously, I've initiated this rule with my friends. I don't want to be on your social media. Film whatever you want and take photos, but please ask consent to post if I'm in it. It kind of changed the norms, and now it's pretty natural to immediately show each other what we shot and tacitly wait for approval before posting. If the person doesn't say anything, then that's a no. If they are, "So cool, tag me in that," or something similar, it's a green light. I thought this was normal. I always ask people if I can post pictures of them before I actually post. I miss my waistline. I remember thinking I was big then. Wish I was that big now. I wish I could still be as pretty as I was when I thought I was ugly. Not having to make my own dinners and do my laundry. Didn't thank you enough, Mom. Arcades, music stores everywhere, music TV, people buying music. Something my wife brought up while talking about this post. Magazines, man! Everyone had their favorites for whatever hobby or interest they had. For me, it was Guitar World. Picking up the issues with bands I loved and plinking along to the tab on my crappy electric guitar. For my wife, it was 17, checking out the most recent trends. Or Thrasher, when it was just a skate magazine and not a clothing brand. Even Rolling Stone was a big deal for mainstream artists. Then those of us into an alternate crowd, there were tattoo mags like Savage. I and my wife used to scour our local 7-Elevens waiting for the new issue of Savage to show up. I get that you can find blogs, etc. online with the same info, and most of these mags still exist, but it's just not the same. The car design mostly. Cars from the 90s era carried really unique design lines, unlike today. Every single company feels like a copycat of each other. Other than that, the lack of social media, fashion, and grunge music. Pop-up up and down headlights. Yes, the 1997 Corvette C5, 1998 Lamborghini Diablo SV, and the most beautiful of them all, the 1995 Ferrari 355. Those are still the most iconic machines which bring me straight back to my childhood. My metabolism, and everyone thought they were fat, but when you look at pictures, everyone is a skeleton. Not having a care in the world. Yes, along with that feeling of being young. Honestly, the thing I miss the most and the thing that is so hard to explain to modern kids is hanging out. Before cell phones, people used to just go to each other's homes or to some public space and just spend time together. This continued well into the internet era, but smartphones large killed it. Early cell phones were very basic and functional, basically just like having a landline in your car, bag, or pocket. You could call someone or receive a call, but what did you say? Most of the time, it was just making plans to hang out in person. You weren't using those cell phones for long phone calls just to chat. Those minutes were expensive. No real social media. By the late 90s, we had chat rooms, but it wasn't as pervasive as it is now. Most people's internet time was limited, and we all had lives outside of the internet. The thing is, these days, no one has remotely any idea what that is to live outside of the internet. Gas prices. When putting a 5 in the tank actually did more than just moisten the gas tank. I remember me and my high school friends chipping in change to buy gas, just to cruise around. We'd collect maybe $1.50 and it'd be enough for most of the night. My childhood and TV commercials. I never got to play with sock'em boppers, and Miss Cleo never got to tell my fortune. Call me now. I can still hear that voice. The Terminator movies. Hype. What makes absolutely no sense to you at all? Seems like half of the true crime shows I watch involve life insurance. What I don't understand is how the perpetrators convince themselves that being the beneficiary on a brand new life insurance policy and then having the insured turn up dead within days or weeks is not going to put you under a detective's microscope. Even more suspicious are the ones who immediately make the claim for payout within a day of the death. At least sit on it for a month or two and act like you're grieving. I watched a true crime show once, and the cop there said that most criminal cases involve very dumb people. It's not some grand battle of wits. It's averagely smart cops versus almost mentally challenged criminals. Smart ones don't get caught. I watched a documentary on a French bank robber who broke into bank vaults after hours and got away with it for years. In an interview with a detective that was after him for like a decade, when he was asked how the bank robber eluded capture for so long, he more or less said, "Most criminals are stupid, which makes them easy to catch. Smart people usually figure out that getting a job is much easier and less risky than a life of crime, so they go and do that. When really smart people actually put their mind to committing crimes, it can be very hard to catch them. Thankfully, it's good for my job. Most of them are stupid." My first language was Spanish, which I learned at home. I learned English at school and with my friends outside of school. In addition, German is spoken. Surprisingly, when I speak in my brain, it's always in English. When I pronounce them out loud, though, they come out in the correct language. I knew someone who was a foreign exchange student to Germany, and when he returned to America, his thoughts were in German. My native language is German, but I surround myself with a lot of English, watching shows in English, YouTube videos, and so on. And sometimes, I struggle to find a specific word in German, but the English word instantly comes to my mind. Brains are crazy. If you don't have money, you are charged fees. Being broke is expensive. Maintenance on a $2,000 car versus maintenance on a $30,000 car. How babies just go from swimming and breathing in a pouch of goo to being born and able to breathe normal air. It makes no sense to me. How does something go from not breathing air to breathing air in like a second? The babies don't get it either. That's why they cry in confusion. Something interesting I learned from my baby's doctor when my baby was ill. Babies will cry in order to get more oxygen if they are struggling to breathe. So when they first come out, this now totally makes sense to me. Why they are crying, and why it's an issue if they are not, and why it's a sign that a baby isn't breathing if they don't cry when first born. It seems so obvious, but not at the same time. Those Facebook photos promise you a lot of money if you post them. Is it true that people believe it? How and what environment, under what conditions could that possibly work? Is this some sort of inside joke that I'm not aware of? Write amen. You can break a bone and it will heal on its own, but if you develop a little cavity, you must get it filled. Teeth aren't made out of the same cells as bones, therefore can't heal like bones do. Still dumb in terms of evolution. If a pizza costs $9 and I order 2 of them, where the hell does my pizza joint get $39.86 from? From experience, you have to order in a very specific way. I work as a manager at Pizza Hut, and 2 people ordering the exact same thing can have a difference of plus or minus $25 depending on how they order due to specialties that are actually always available. It's insane. Sounds like a needlessly complicated system to take more money from unsuspecting people. What is the root of consciousness and why is there something instead of nothing? Gonna offer answers from 2 books I've read and probably misinterpreted. 1, we're not as conscious as we think we are. We mostly don't know what's going on in our brains. The root of consciousness is just specific parts of the brain which let us be aware of ourselves and mediate between our various, often conflicting impulses and beliefs, which themselves come from within the brain. Incognito, David Eagleman. 2. Any attempt to solve this question can only take place in a universe where there is something, the anthropic principle. That's why there is something. There may well have been many nothings that lasted eternities, but we'll never hear of those. A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking. How Bluetooth works. Radio waves, like all wireless communication. I find the fact astonishing that just by waves you can transfer data. Space. Look at the moon. Some days you can see Saturn or Jupiter out there. Look at the stars. You think about us people on this rock in space all running around. We're floating in space on a rock, spinning around, all together, one. And space is just so big. It's overwhelming. Really, really big. I can't even comprehend how big. It doesn't even make sense how big it is. The Earth rotates on an axis. The Earth orbits the Sun. The solar system is orbiting the center of the galaxy. The galaxy is moving away from some starting point in the universe. The universe is expanding. Comprehending all that motion simultaneously blows my mind. Planes. It still amazes me how something that massive can fly. Same thing for me with ships. Like, how does several hundred tons of steel float on the water? You think it's a heavy ship, but it still weighs a lot less than the water it's pushing down on. Punishing the kid who fought the bully. Punishing the whole group for one person's actions. There goes that kid's social life. It's also a war crime. How people came up with baking. I get to eat meats and veggies and fruits. That's just food that is pretty much ready to go. But somehow someone figured that you can grind this plant into a powder, add a certain amount of water and some chicken eggs and some oil and some other crushed plant stuff and then heat it for X minutes, and now you have cake or bread or cookies or whatever. In famine, people start eating anything they can find and discover new foods and also accidents. Get your flour wet, but it's near some natural yeast. You are too poor not to still use it, so you cook that bubbling mass, and it's better than the hard tack that you were making. It's a little sour, but delicious, and now you've invented sourdough. Necessity is the mother of invention. How did Yzma and Kronk get back first? By all accounts, it doesn't make sense. Grown-ass adults not taking responsibility for their actions or property and expecting others to clean up after them. I clean dorm bathrooms, and it seems messy, inconsiderate people have been that way all their lives. Some kids vomit and clearly do their best wasted attempt to clean it up. Other kids just go for the gold and crap in the shower. When I wear sunglasses anywhere while it's cold outside, some cashier or receptionist will say something like, "Oh, look at you," longing for warmer weather, or remind me that there's snow on the ground, or ask me why I'm wearing sunglasses when it's so cold outside. Guys, it's a beautiful day. They aren't referred to as hot weather spectacles. Is snow not common in your area or something? Everyone is wearing sunglasses in my area during the winter because even on cloudy days, the light is reflecting up off of the snow. Seriously, when there's snow on the ground and a fullish moon, it's way brighter at night because of the snow. Why does everyone call those kids in those "I told my kid I ate their Halloween candy" videos bratty if they get mad? The kid has every right to be upset. All you're teaching your child is that they're not supposed to be upset if someone takes something they value, and that they've put time and effort into procuring. I've always hated those videos. I hate that we expect kids to tolerate certain behaviors that we as adults would fight someone on sight for. I was thinking about sharing the other day. Like, why do we care about making kids share? Adults hardly share anything. You come over and want to play with my stuff? How people can just go up to complete strangers and start a conversation. It comes as naturally to them as breathing. In my experience, you're either the person who's born with it or you have to learn it like any other skill. I'm absolutely the latter. The trick is practice, like all things. Start with low-stakes situations like a barista at a coffee place, nowhere near your home. Absolute worst case is you say something a bit stupid and the barista forgets about you as you walk out the door having learned a lesson. It quickly becomes not scary, and from there it becomes natural. Totally agree here. I mainly started filling awkward silences during checkout at stores with terrible jokes or inane observations. I'm still awkward as heck, but I make friends wherever I go. According to my partner, really just gotta practice and be okay with failing a whole bunch. That I can't get a job without experience. Like, how am I going to get the experience if not at a job? Corporate jobs are a game that you play. The rules don't make sense. You were a cashier at a store? No, instead, you say you worked in customer support in a customer-facing role where you consistently met your weekly goals and targets by creating user-centric experiences by cultivating all resources available to you at the time. LOL, or something like that. Why do I have to file my taxes? You already know what I either owe or am getting back. Just either bill me or pay me. This is it right here. I've even gotten IRS letters telling me I calculated wrong. Okay, well then, why ask me to even do it? Me too, though most years when this happens they give me my money back. So that's not too bad. How your body knows when to stop growing your eyebrows, arm hair, leg hair, pubes, etc., but your facial hair and the hair on your head grow endlessly. I don't know how old you are, but this will eventually change. I've seen men with eyebrows growing past their face. Why people are so offended by swear words that they gasp and change channels when they hear someone say damn. My mom does this. She explained it to me multiple times and I still don't get it. Alternatively, how some words were decided to be swear words, despite having otherwise normal meanings. I mean, I can say poop and that's okay, but crap is just too far? How the internet works. The internet is really just your computer asking for documents from other computers. When you go to reddit.com, your computer goes to the internet equivalent of a phone book called DNS and looks up reddit.com and gets back an IP address like 12.34.56.78. Your computer then uses that IP address to talk to the Reddit server and ask for the content for the web page. It gets back a text file from the Reddit servers that tell you your internet browser has to draw the site correctly on your computer. It gets back a text file from the Reddit servers that tells your internet browser how to draw the site correctly on your computer. Gee whiz, that must take ages. House price rises. How seriously can people have so much money for crappy houses? Where are all these great paying jobs that service the mortgage? My partner and I have decent middle class jobs, teacher and nurse, yet cannot afford to buy in the city where we live, and not even close to the city where we live. How can a pandemic wreck an economy, throw thousands out of work needing to rely on government handouts, yet house prices increase? It's insane. I bought my house for $119,000 in 2009. It's a cute little 1,700 square foot house in a decent neighborhood in a decent part of San Antonio. If I were to spend $20 or $30K to renovate it, I could easily get $290K for it right now. There is no way I could afford my own house if I bought it today. There are one-bedroom apartments in my city that are higher than my mortgage payment. All of this is inflation, but wages are stagnant. I don't claim to know a lot about economics, but I can't see this leading to good things if the trend continues. Same. I live in Fort Worth and bought my house in 2014 for $165K. I could sell it for double that now. I'd like to upgrade, but what I'd make selling it would all go into buying a new house and probably plus some. Balancing equations in chemistry. I tried for weeks to understand the concept, but I still can't understand moles and Avogadro's numbers to save my life. Avocado's number is the number of avocados a mole can eat in an hour. Goat eyes. As a high school teacher, I just forced my students to write a point evidence justification paragraph proving that goats are aliens. Lots of prey animals have horizontally shaped pupils. This is so that they can absorb light coming from more directions, which makes them more able to see any incoming threats. Prey animals will also usually have their eyes on the sides of their head, so they can see around themselves more. Lots of predators will have vertically shaped pupils. This makes them able to absorb light from one angle very well. They will also have more closely set eyes so they can focus on one spot very well. Interesting stuff. Most land-based predators have forward-facing eyes. Depth perception is crucial for hunting. That says a lot for humans. Shifts eyes nervously. Bitcoin. I don't think 90% of people who invest in Bitcoin understands it. 90% of people don't understand fiat currency either. People thinking the earth is flat, even after proving themselves wrong. Behind the curve is the best example I've ever seen of confirmation bias. The people involved are clever enough to keep coming up with experiments that are genuinely useful for determining whether the earth is round or flat, but then immediately start looking for excuses when they're proven wrong. The laser isn't hitting where it should. We must have messed up. The gyroscope is picking up a 15-degree-per-hour drift. We need to disprove that. Photographs. I push a button and a moment in time is saved forever. I should point out that photography has been developing for 150 years. It literally started as some French dudes being like, hey, if I take this thingy and reflect this light off of it, this way, and then it will hold onto that light and you can look at it. It's developed a lot since then. It's developed a lot. I see what you did there. People that don't flush public restroom toilets. What's the deal with that? Do they not flush in their own homes? Is it laziness? Contempt with society? Seeing retail and other workers suffer? Just not knowing better? Laziness is my guess. Why bother with the extra work? You'll probably never use that bathroom again, and if you do, it's basically guaranteed that someone else will have used it after you or cleaned it, and the chance of someone calling you out for it in a public place is small. Even if they do call you out, what will they do? Call you a bad person? Like they care. At home it's different though, there's no staff to clean the bathroom after you, and unless you live with someone, no one but you is going to use it. And if you do live with someone else and still do this, you can't just go somewhere to avoid them all day, you'll have to go back. Need to clarify, not my views. Clean your frickin' mess and flush the damn toilet. That black holes can bend light. Like, what is that blasphemy? Black holes bend not just light, but time. Giant celestial bodies, where all of our known laws of the universe go to die. I am writing this near a black hole 3,206 years from now. Your now. The black hole has messed with the Wi-Fi signals too. That's added to it. Redstone comparators. Truth, I use them only by following a tutorial exactly, and even then I break it half the time. Spending most daylight hours at work 5 out of 7 days. Small businesses do not open up on Sundays, which is one of the only 2 days per week most people are off. Most of the fashion industry not supplying clothing items to plus-size people, and obviously missing out on a ton of money. It's dark when I go to work, and this time of year it's dark when I come home, thanks to the cloud cover during the winter here. I've gone weeks without seeing the sun before. It freaking sucks, and can easily trigger seasonal depression. NFTs. Unfortunately, if NFTs make no sense to you, that means you understand them perfectly. Nah, they just don't have the need to launder money. Dancing. The idea of moving my body around in time with music is completely alien and unfathomable to me. How about tapping your foot to the beat? Nope, never had the urge. I fully recognize I'm in the minority. People are proud of traits or actions that are negative, or at least not positive. For example, people proudly say they don't read or don't exercise. Sometimes plain old honesty can come across as pride or even arrogance. I don't know anyone who is truly proud of not reading or exercising, but I do know people who, if you ask if they read, they'll give you a plain honest no without the slightest attempt to soften it. It's not that they're proud. You asked, they answered, and that's the answer. If they're proud of something, they're proud of their ability to completely own their faults and display them openly for all to see. It's an honest way to live, and they have every right to be proud of that. If you know anyone who is legit proud of not reading or exercising, as in their choice not to was a principled one, and or they look down on people who do those things, I'd be interested in hearing their backstory. Credit scores. Especially how completely paying off a loan can significantly lower your credit score. Yeah, exactly. I've been hurt by a 100-point decrease from paying off $30,000 early, and it's been a year and I'm still not recovered. I'm not happy about it. People intentionally harm others just for the sake of causing pain. Just why? Do you even know what you're doing? How awful does that feel? Maybe someone should do the same things to you. Maybe you'll understand then. Not like that's the best way to do it, but the one most likely to succeed, I guess. They do it because it gives them a thrill and feeling of power. You return the favor and they'll get you back 30 times over, and never forget. Shaving eyebrows off and painting back on. They do that to draw their eyebrows in a completely different shape than the one that they were born with. Like nowadays, it's popular to draw them higher to give the same effect as a facelift. It makes sense to me. It's not like they're shaving them to draw them back on the exact same shape. That would indeed be useless. I told my girlfriend she had drawn her eyebrows too high. She looked very surprised. Dishwashers. Shouldn't be that easy to get dishes clean. Modern dishwashers save more water than you do by cleaning plates and a sink too. That really seems weird to me. I always assumed they'd waste more. I had roommates in college who believed that the dishwasher didn't get dishes as clean as if you hand washed them. Like, bruh, the dishwasher can produce much hotter water than your human hands can handle for a much longer time at a much higher pressure. The more I think about love, it doesn't make much sense. It is weird how this random person you basically randomly met at one time in your life suddenly becomes the most important person in your life, so much so that you would kill for that person. The same person can suddenly become the person you want to kill if that person breaks your heart. If you would have never met that person, you wouldn't have any negative or positive feelings about that person, but would have those feelings for another person. In the end, love is one of those things that don't need to make sense. It is something to just enjoy when it happens. I was thinking about this today, how you can have such strong romantic feelings for someone, but not just anyone. It must be a result of our evolution to continue the species or something. How normal income people can afford to go on vacations. Is everyone just living in massive amounts of debt or what? I can barely afford to go camping for Christ's sake, and I don't owe the bank anything. Who in their right mind would take out a line of credit to go somewhere? I have the same question about middle-class Americans' lives in general. How can they even afford anything when prices are so ridiculous? I get dizzy when I look at American college tuitions and everyone says they are way too high, but then people go to college anyway and continue to live a normal middle-class lifestyle. How? Does everyone just start saving for their child's education as soon as it's born? Traditionally, the middle class has been fueled by home ownership. My parents got lucky and bought a house in an area that saw massive growth, so they sold it for nearly triple what they paid for it. That, and when you own a home, your mortgage stays constant. My rent has gone up over 30% in the last 2 years, but if I owned a home, it would have stayed the same. The other thing I see these days is inheritance. The last point, college debt, ultimately becomes the child's responsibility, not the parents'. You see the younger generation being held back from buying houses partially because of the massive loan they start out with. We need to teach our children to treat college costs like any other purchase. How the masses keep voting for people who have zero interest in advancing their cause. The masses are largely uninformed and vote for reasons often unrelated to policy. Everything being wrapped in plastic. Why people smoke cigarettes. These crappy things should have died a long time ago. Almost like they're addictive or something. There is no logical reason to even start smoking. They are addictive, sure, but there are also many ways to combat the addiction in order to stop. The price of beef jerky. Everybody talks about gas prices, but not the fact that I just paid almost $9 for a bag of Jack Links. I mean, it takes like 4 times the weight in raw meat to make a given amount of jerky. Even without markup, for processing, a 3-ounce bag of jerky costing $9 isn't crazy when you consider it's equivalent to almost a pound of raw beef. Working 50 hours a week, including travel time, only to spend my Saturday doing catch-up tasks, and Sunday being burned out and then having to prep for the coming week in the evenings. Also, why my boss is so massively stuck in the past for working practices. They forbid working from home purely because he's cheap and rented new premises this year, prior to COVID, so obviously had to get his money's worth. Casting Mark Wahlberg as Sully in the new Uncharted movie. How flies can get indoors easily but struggle to get out. What language deaf people speak in their head. I actually did research on this in my ASL course. If the person wasn't born deaf and learned a spoken language before becoming deaf, they mostly think in said language. But if they were born deaf, they think in sign language. They feel the movements of their hands. They see the words in their head. See lip movements in their head, if they learned to lip read. Or just see scenarios. It was super interesting to learn about. That you can't have a conversation with yourself. You can't? Nope, you can't. You need 2 or more people. How can people clearly envision images in their mind? Mine is very blurry and faint. For exams, I could remember the exact image of a textbook page my answer was on. I could even picture in my head the placement of the paragraph. Why countries have different names in each language? Like you call yourself Hispana? Nope, you're Spain. Polska? Nope, you're Poland. How did Nippon become Japan? How hard is it to say Italia instead of Italy? I understand that some places have their own names for lands before interacting with people from there, but do they just disregard what the natives of the land call the place? Cancel culture. Put your money where your mouth is what it used to be called. You just didn't do business with them anymore. Now with the internet, you have an audience to tell everyone you aren't going to. What single scene ruined an entire movie or TV series? Who has a better story than Bran the Broken? Literally everyone was more interesting than Bran the Boring. Jamie, the just remembered he was the bad guy. Tyrion, the technically experienced at this, Sansa, the sort of prefers ruling, Jon, the Jesus of this whole story, Gendry, the genetically in line for the throne. This would take all night. Barney and Robin got divorced like 5 minutes after they got married. Was looking for this. We spent an entire season on their wedding just for them to break up 10 minutes into the finale. Barney is the type of man who will spend years trying to win a bet, and yet he's unable to handle Robin's career. The final 5 minutes of the original Roseanne. Dan died, the sisters swapped husbands, Mom's gay, Jackie's gay. This was all a book. The final season was a nightmare and creatively depleted, so the writing room decided to try a retcon and failed. Not really a thing at the time. It doesn't fix the sheer terribleness of the last season, but I'll give them credit for trying to breathe new life into an already dead entity. Agreed, the reason the show was so popular was the fact that the family was so relatable to the average American. Then they win the lottery? And Dan cheated on Roseanne? Nah, get that out of here. The moment I heard how they pronounced Aang's name in M. Night's adaptation of Avatar instantly killed me with laughter, as well as, the whole movie. Albus Severus Potter. That kid got bullied a lot, and you know it. I think having one of the kids being named after one of them would have been fine, but having one kid named after both feels very fanfiction-like. How I Met Your Mother, 9 years of development and growth ends up trashed with 90 seconds of Barney and Robin getting divorced. Mom makes a cameo and Ted and Robin hook up. I have never gone back and watched a single rerun because of that debacle. Just turn it off the second Ted says, "And that, kids, is how I met your mother." So the first episode? Every doctor, hospital, ER show depicts physicians getting involved in patients' private lives once they leave medical care. Seriously? No physician around here does that unless he's trying to get laid. In the finale of Pretty Little Liars, when the evil twin sister was revealed, ruined the whole show for me. I recently did a rewatch of that show and oh boy, was that hard to get through. Watching teenage girls in couture and 6-inch heels, even though they're always physically running away from something, never password protecting their phones, laptops, etc., leaving important flash drives stuck in your open laptop in your living room, the evil twin twist was the cherry on top of a very sloppy cake. What always annoyed me was when they learned that people were watching or recording them through their open windows/open curtains, and they never bothered to close them after learning that. Even on the ground floor of their 2-story mansions, even at night. Nope, still gonna get naked in front of the open windows so all the perverts can watch. The Dothraki charge into the Night King's army. I just sat there and told myself, what the heck is this ridiculous crap? The entire battle strategy was terrible. I mean, you had several different armies and no one bothered to point that out? The trebuchets were in front. Arya goes to King's Landing to kill Cersei. Jaime almost died in a fight. They should have let him die. Arya finds him, takes his face, becomes Jaime, and goes to Cersei. She dies in his arms after he stabs her. Prophecy fulfilled, and then she shows Cersei it was her as she's dying. But she can't kill the Night King and Cersei. Yeah, because she never should have killed the Night King. Jon Snow was supposed to kill the Night King. Just once it would have been nice to have something happen that was expected. They got so obsessed with surprises that they ruined some major plot opportunities. Jaime's actor has said that he was convinced that they were building to an Arya twist until he turned the page of his script book and there wasn't anything else written. You know the writing turned bad when all the cast was disappointed. My mom is still mad about the final scene of St. Elsewhere. I love it because of all of the crossovers that you can effectively put like 30 shows in that snow globe. Not even 30. They've stretched it to 100 or so shows. I really hated that in the movie 12 Years a Slave, they had him hook up with a woman while he was a slave. In his book, it's a true story that he wrote himself after getting out. He says he stayed faithful to his wife the whole time. I don't care if someone thought the audience wouldn't believe that. It's wrong for them to insert something like that when he clearly stated he didn't. Watching that right now. Haven't even read the book and I thought it was weird. Man's just seemed faithful. Carl Grimes' death. Screw Scott Gimble or whatever his name is. They really did that kid wrong on the show and in real life. I just saw Grimes and I thought you were going to say Frank Grimy Grimes. The kiss between Sharon Carter and Captain America in Civil War. Why did they kiss in the first place, and why was it never addressed again? Because if you have an opening to kiss Captain America, you take it. Why did I read this in Ant-Man's voice? Honestly, the Red John reveal in The Mentalist kinda ticked me off. It just felt like they had a hat with every minor character's name in it and just picked one. Their boss, Bertram, would probably have been a good Red John, as at least he was a rather important person in the story. Oh yeah, that was another really good fan theory. There were so many good ones that they went with cop number 3 from episode 4. George Clooney cut himself loose from a space station in order to save Sandra Bullock. His velocity was 0 relative to the station. He wouldn't have fell, and he wasn't pulling her down. This movie is proof George Clooney would rather die than be with a woman his age. When Zapp left American Gladiators in 1995. Too soon, man, too soon. How has nobody mentioned the infamous "Martha, why did you say that name" scene from Batman vs. Superman? It's unforgivably dumb. Also, the element in Avatar is called unobtainium. So stupid. That movie came out, 12 years ago? I still randomly get mad about that from time to time. I think no one mentioned BVS because everything in the movie is stupid. From Luther knowing everyone's identity, to Batman putting a tracker in a van and following it and destroying the van and tracker with the Batmobile, to Superman stopping Batman from fighting crime, to Superman letting the Capitol explode and not hearing the bomb before it went off, to Superman finding Lois in Africa but not finding his mom in his own city. That is pretty out of character for Luther. Comics. Luther refuses to accept the fact a godlike being like Supes wants to live as a normal human. Even when handed the identity on a silver plate, he thinks it's bogus because it contradicts his philosophy about power and dominance. The end of the movie Law-Abiding Citizen. It was great up until then. I loved Supernatural, and everything was pretty perfect all the way through season 5. Good character development, redemption arcs, tying the original storyline up with a nice bow. Sam will be trapped forever, but in doing so redeems himself and saves the Earth. Dean might finally have a chance at happiness and the stable home life he deserves. And then nope! Sneaky last moment of the last episode of season 5, Sam has escaped from hell and is back on Earth, so everyone gets ready for like 8 more seasons of this. 10 more. Show just ended after 15 seasons. I stopped watching it after God's sister got involved, and they stopped at the end of the world for the umpteenth time. I was like, yep, this is a good place to end the show, but nope, they kept going. Couldn't watch Bones after what happened to Sweets. I ended up really liking Aubrey, who essentially replaced Sweets. Completely different characters. He was fun. You're right though, Sweets dying was so out of left field that it was awful. When Deb confessed her love for Dexter, who the heck confesses romantic feelings to their brother? I don't care if he was her adopted brother, it's still her brother. Entirely ruined the rest of the show for me. The stupid therapist put the idea into her head too. She didn't even feel that way up until then. Dear writers, don't do this. It is even more awkward when you realize that Jennifer Carpenter and Michael C. Hall were in the middle of a divorce while making this season. Honestly, I always thought the writers did this just to screw with them. It served no purpose to the plot, so why? The last 5 to 10 minutes of Veronica Mars. We're going to pretend season 4 doesn't exist, especially that ending. They were all so out of character the entire season. Okay, Logan showed adult growth and maturity, but nuts to the rest. The movie, or the books, are the end as far as I'm concerned. Season 4 is a fever dream, or like the gas leak season of Community. Star Wars 9. Spoilers ahead, but I really don't want you to watch it. It was only visually good and is no longer in cinemas. The story between Rey and Kylo Ren was really interesting. You had 2 people on differing sides, with different stories concerning their experience with the Force too, constantly fighting nearly to death, but increasingly with kind of a shared burden. One is definitely an insane antagonist, but one who was pulled to the light side, reverse Anakin. I liked that interpretation. I was really intrigued even in this movie by how human it seemed, but most of all how platonic. Many people got rather a siblings vibe from them, and I would find both of them really being such or just being Force brothers, again sharing this burden and parting ways peacefully, really memorable. And then they kissed. Furthermore, after all he's put her through, she goes in for it. I cannot forgive the screenwriters for the feeling seeing this gave me. It shifted their entire dynamic and ruined an otherwise, far as I can remember, really fascinating story between 2 people. Plus to me promoted toxic romances alongside so many other series. And the opening montage of him doing war crime things? Yep, he was never supposed to get even close to full redemption, and the movie didn't solve it well. He could have done his part in aiding the rebellion and then leave. That'd have worked. But that's it. Everyone Ray knew would have told her she's completely insane. Hey, are they pulling the "I'm the only one who understands him" bit here? Also, is it just me or do the screenwriters not really know what to do with him? They go back and forth between him being confused and crazy and not caring one bit about how many people he hurts. When Joey and Rachel kiss. Especially considering they had a pretty wholesome friendship dynamic long before that. There aren't enough well-portrayed platonic male to female friendships on TV. I see what you mean, but I think it was more critical that they kept the platonic friendship of Joey and Phoebe intact. The ending of Sex and the City. Sorry kids, but in real life, Big wouldn't have chased Carrie to Paris, and things magically work out for them. I would have been much happier with Carrie riding off into the sunset as a happy single gal who's not ready to settle for a guy who jerked her around for years. And I'm a happily ever after movie TV show kind of person, but it just didn't fit the narrative of SATC for me. And those movies, all of a sudden they're all high fashion models, even Miranda. When Rory ended up pregnant, not to mention completely washed up in the Gilmore Girls revival. I don't even mind that she wasn't a successful journalist. She really never had the personality for that career, and it was realistic for the time period that she graduated, but I hated how she was Logan's side piece while cheating on her poor boyfriend, who she could never remember to break up with, and he seemed like genuinely a good guy. Also, Luke and Lorelai living together for 10 years, and the subject of marriage and kids apparently just never came up. Lane seemed happy, even though I never really liked her, and Zach together. Jess seemed to be doing well too, and to be honest, Rory at this point doesn't deserve him. The only good storyline was Emily's in my opinion. After Richard's death, she had to learn to be her own person outside of their marriage. I absolutely loved when she became a guide at the museum and terrified all the kids. I know they'll probably never make more, so in my head once Logan finds out the baby is his, they'll realize they still love each other and finally decide to just be together. I loved Emily's story in the revival so much. I agree with you totally about Rory's career. It fits that after being told for years that she's special and amazing, that she totally crumbles when she isn't instantly successful. I also totally see it being realistic that she's cheating with Logan because she's always done what's made her happy at the expense of the other person. She did it with Dean, both when she broke up with him for Jess and when she slept with him while he was married, and didn't go through any significant transformation since then. Well, obviously Bobby's showering in Dallas after having been dead for 13 weeks. The way they fooled the tabloids was funny though. They had Patrick Duffy film it as a soap commercial. He comes out of the shower, says, "Good morning," then does his pitch for the soap. For the Dallas shock ending, they simply cut off the part after "good morning." May already be on here, but Scrubs had an amazing last scene. JD seeing his happy future as he says goodbye to Sacred Heart. Then they made another season. What I find most frustrating about that is that the producers of the 9th season intended it to be a spin-off show. The network kind of forced them to call it Scrubs Season 9 because of Scrubs' success. If it hadn't been named Scrubs, it probably would have been a decent season or show. Source: some episode of Zach Braff's and Donald Faison's podcast. I'm most upset about how the setup for Season 9 undermines everything from the Season 8 finale. Season 8 ended with JD leaving Sacred Heart to live closer to Kim and actually be involved with Sam's life. Do we even see Kim and Sam in Season 9? Seems like JD really stopped caring about his kid after knocking Elliot up. Season 8 had an episode about how the distance was going to affect Turk and JD's friendship, and they accepted it. Not relevant at the start of Season 9 because they're working together again. JD had a damn heartfelt goodbye from Dr. Cox at the end of Season 8. Not relevant at the start of Season 9. That Season 8 finale was so damn good, Season 9 really did it dirty. When Indiana Jones jumped into that fridge to avoid a nuclear bomb strike. I liked the brief usage of the term nuking the fridge as a form of jumping the shark. Chris Chibnall single-handedly destroying more than 50 years of Doctor Who by making the timeless child be the Doctor. I've written the whole period off since Capaldi's regeneration. Flux isn't bad, but it's still got all of Chibnall's worst excesses in it. A guy at the stand in Gladiator. He had a camera and was wearing jeans. Man, that guy was from the future. I've never noticed that one, but the part where they're on foot in the middle of the arena fighting the guys on the chariots, when one of the chariots flips over, you see the gas cylinder they used to flip it. It's right in the very center of the shot and visible for a good 2 seconds. The VIPs in Squid Game. They could have just shown up and not said a single word. The point of powerful rich men would still be made, but it wouldn't ruin the last couple of episodes with horrid dialogue. Now you know how it feels when a character speaks a foreign language in your flick, only now it's not just some meaningless exotic sounding noise. Exactly this, now they know how awkward it feels. Not so much a scene, but the butthole removal in the movie Cats. Like, we all knew it was going to be a flop, but you all know with some butthole here and there, you might bring a few more folks. Maybe the furries. I don't know. Oh boy, this made me laugh more than it should have. If I had a gold award, this is where I would put it. Poochie leaving for his home planet. Like, what? They just introduced this rad character for Itchy and Scratchy to hang with, and then he just leaves? They didn't even make it to the goddamn fireworks factory. How they ended the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. Killed me that Orlando Bloom's character can only see his wife and son every 10 years. I actually thought it was kind of cool that they had a bittersweet ending like that. I love the ending to that movie so much. Once every 10 years is still better than dying on that boat. That crap episode of Stranger Things where there were other kids with powers, they tried so hard to make a spin-off work. That kiss scene in Prince Caspian, not in the book, made no sense in the context of the story, but for some reason they decided to shoehorn it in and sprinkle a load of sexual tension throughout the film leading up to it. Totally ruined the film, and given how crap Dawn Treader was, I think Prince Caspian was the beginning of the end of that series. I've never seen a series with such a dramatic drop in quality between every movie as the Narnia movies. The first one is legitimately one of my favorite book-to-movie adaptations ever. It stayed true to the books, didn't really remove anything, and they added a few small things that actually were a very good fit well into the story. Prince Caspian is the most okay movie ever made, and Dawn Treader was a steaming pile of crap. Daenerys in the last episode of Game of Thrones. It was so dumb and forced. She's still the best character, and I pretend it didn't happen. I don't know if it counts, but there was also the game Little Hope. I loved it until the ending. It ruined everything, and I don't even want to replay it anymore. For me, it's the whole Maggie the Frog prophecy. It's the entire reason for Cersei's madness and her hatred of Tyrion. It says that she'll die at the hand of her younger brother. Jaime is the younger twin. Everything was being set up for that. Cersei becoming a mad regent, Jaime's redemption arc. I thought it was in the bag that she'd try to wildfire King's Landing during the siege, and Jaime would be forced to kill her. But instead, he undoes all his character development and runs back to her, and then they get crushed by debris. The problem is that it's the obviously correct thing to do for a character arc, but modern writers are obsessed with the idea of subversion. That's got to be the scene from season 12 of Doctor Who, where they explain that the Doctor is not from this universe and that the people who found her stole the secret to practical immortality from her. This single scene rewrote everything we know about the Doctor and destroyed the legacy of one of the longest-running TV shows. Rip William Hartnell, you will always be the first Doctor in my heart. Plus, the whole point of the Doctor is that they were nothing special for a Time Lord, but had to become something special to survive and to make a place for themselves in the universe. Now the writers are just like, oh lol, they were born special. They didn't do crap to make themselves something, it's innate. I'm so upset. When a threat was built up for 8 seasons and was stabbed by a teenage girl, causing him to shatter, an entire army that he had been raising from the dead for thousands of years dropped dead. All he had to do was not show up to the fight at all. I had no problem with who it was. I had a problem with how such a heavy threat was apparently brought down so easily. I don't mind who did it, but more so if it was the Night King's first battle south of the Wall, if they had him completely take the north with a few of the big names making it out and fleeing south, and then maybe when he's pushing on King's Landing is when she kills him. It was just so anticlimactic. That he was such a badass and had so much power to throw a spear and kill a dragon in one shot and lose his first battle, lol. In WandaVision, Monica Rambeau told Wanda they'll never know what you sacrificed to them, after she literally kidnapped and mentally tortured men, women, and children. She knew 100% what she was doing and didn't care. Screw Wanda. I remember this scene. It's so hilarious when you know what she did to those people, literally begging her to end it. Any more and they would have begged for death. The Star Trek Into the Darkness scene where the Doctor chick just gets undressed. It's so dumb because in the very next scene she's wearing the same exact clothes as she was before. Why did she get undressed? It definitely wasn't a change, so who knows? It was to make the thumbnail for the trailer. The last season of Sons of Anarchy was pretty awful, but there was one where they took on a group of former military guys by hiding in an obvious place, and the experienced vets never saw it and got killed. Remember when the annoying hospital administrator who looked down on Tara was retconned as being a former biker whore with a full back tattoo from her old gang? Dan being Gossip Girl. That twist did not make sense at all, but it transitions perfectly into Dan being Joe Goldberg. I wouldn't say this ruined the movie, but it made me frustrated, and the character makes me low-key mad every time I see him. In Avengers Infinity War, Star-Lord does something incredibly stupid at a very critical moment. You know what I'm talking about if you've seen the movie. I get upset every time I think of the scene. I get upset every time I see Star-Lord. When I think of Infinity War, Star-Lord being a dumbass is the first thing that comes to mind rather than all the awesome fight scenes. Every character makes a fatal mistake that leads to the outcome of the movie. Star-Lord's is just the most obvious and egregious of them. Doctor Strange's? Well, not firing the gigantic Chekhov's gun from the start of the movie. You know the one. The one where he literally cut someone's hand off by closing a portal around its arm? In the movie whose plot revolves around cutting someone's hand off? Where you establish that the Magic Man can effortlessly cut off someone's hand? The Tarzan scene in Indy and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Game of Thrones, Stannis sacrificing his daughter? He would have never done it ever, especially book version Stannis. Jane the Virgin when Michael returned from the dead. Rey Skywalker. Some YouTube critic pointed it out best of why she would take the name Skywalker and not something like Organa or Solo. Who do you think she had a better relationship with? The nice old lady who gave her hugs, or the scary homeless man who yelled at her? When Negan smashed Glenn's head in with Lucille, it divided the fanbase so much they didn't even have another zombie get killed the entire rest of Season 7. Kind of mad Han Solo died. At least he did so he wasn't attached to the sequel trilogy for long. I know Harrison Ford originally wanted to die in Star Wars, which is why they had him frozen in the original trilogy. Michael Scott leaving The Office basically ruined the entire series from that point forward. It still has its good points, but I couldn't even bother with the last season. Very rarely does something ruin the whole thing for me. I'm the kind of person that would still enjoy the good parts, even if they would be less good than they used to be. Anyway, a few examples are, the ending of the first Fantastic Beasts film is when Colin Farrell's character turns into an evil-looking Johnny Depp as he was revealed to be Grindelwald. I knew from that moment that any sequels would not be about Newt anymore. I don't know why they still called the sequels Fantastic Beasts. Not one scene, but the few scenes of Bruce Wayne embarrassing himself in the Dark Knight trilogy. Like when he's sleeping in a business meeting or at parties. I mean, the Bruce I know does put on an act of a playboy to the public, but he's not detestable. In fact, he was still a very likable person, and he's in fact a good businessman. It's the reason I'm not a big fan of the Dark Knight trilogy. When Anakin joked about how being a slave master suits him in the Clone Wars show, and when Obi-Wan was waiting and wanting Anakin to blow up his cover to save him instead of wanting him to keep up the act to save the people that they came to save, or reprimanding him for potentially ruining the chance of saving them. These didn't ruin the show, just that specific arc, and affected my opinion over how they were handling the characterization of these two in that show. I would be down for 2 to 3 movies of Newt having quirky magic adventures tracking down fantastic beasts, aka the title of the series, but they pivoted into being Harry Potter prequels. What on earth do shy little Newt and his animals have to do with Magic Hitler? What was something hugely popular that suddenly fell off the face of the earth? I know a guy who saw the whole fidget spinner thing coming. He mass-produced a bunch of them, sold through the entire stock, then sold his company immediately after and bowed out right before the whole thing cratered. I sort of feel sorry for whoever he left holding the bag. But man, those things just didn't stick around long. Must have been a busy afternoon. That man's name? Phineas. Do the Harlem Shake. I went to a wedding reception in 2019 where the whole wedding party danced to a montage of different songs, and then right at the end, Harlem Shake. Seeing people in tuxes and fancy dresses do that was pretty amusing. I was explaining to the older people at the reception that what they just witnessed was a craze from like 5 years previously. That mustache thing? Like the early 2010s where every girl had mustaches on everything, mustache bags, pencil cases, clothes, etc. Remember when Lyft first started and people identified themselves as Lyft drivers by having a giant fuzzy pink mustache on their front bumper? And you'd have just pinpointed the moment when mustaches became lame. 3D TVs. I am not sure if I would call them hugely popular, but at CES one year, they were super popular, and by the following year, there was barely one in sight. There was almost no content produced, and they were insanely expensive. I actually had a 3D-ready TV, but the glasses themselves cost something like $150 a piece. I said screw that. There are two 3D TV technologies, alternating frame and polarization based. The former required active shutter glasses, which would show each eye every other frame. The other would effectively cut the vertical resolution in half, but the glasses were dirt cheap. I had the latter, and at 1080p down to 540p effectively, the polarization method was quite noticeable as far as the effect on resolution. I watched Tron Legacy and tried playing Assassin's Creed Revelations in 3D. Haven't tried with the 4K TV yet, which came with glasses. Should give it a shot out of curiosity. Probably Game of Thrones. I don't even see many memes about the ending being bad anymore. No one talks about it. Good answer. I was all ready to slap down $100 to $150 for the full series on Blu-ray and was waiting for it to finish before I bought any seasons. And so glad I did, because now I wouldn't even pay $50. Those sour Altoids. Damn, those were good. Lofty Pursuits, a YouTube channel and candy maker in Florida, has brought them back recently. Coney 2012. I got in trouble when they made us watch that in school. I said that people would forget about it in 6 months. I just didn't expect it to go away in that manner. I really wonder why it was shown to everyone in school, from elementary to high school, at the same time. Raising awareness, sure, but what exactly did they expect a bunch of American middle schoolers to do about African militia? The whole Joe Exotic thing didn't last very long, although there are periodic updates. Among other things, the property was sold and could not be used as a zoo for at least 100 years, and one of the zookeepers who did appear on the show died from an overdose. I honestly feel like that was peak pandemic TV. Dad, what was the COVID pandemic like? Well, son, lots of drink, Xbox, you were born, and the world distracted itself by learning about a guy named Joe. He owned a lot of tigers. Are those fidget spinners still around? I used one in the hospital after some trauma and it was great. I didn't have the mental energy for Netflix, reading, or audiobooks. I loved my fidget spinner and wiggling my toes in brightly colored socks. Fidget spinners, great hospital gifts. Furbies. Not that I mind. Those things were creepy. Mine turned on by itself. I threw it out the window. Mine did too, and started talking in my closet. Scariest crap for a grade schooler to hear. Pokemon Go. Sure, it still exists, but there was one summer that it united the world. I still get on it from time to time. Summer 16 was such a crazy time. I wish that feeling would have lasted forever. I spent hours walking around a Revolutionary War site with about 100 other people every night for a month straight when it was new. Silly bands, anybody? They come in cycles. All 3 of my kids got into them at different times. They come back whenever schools forget they need to ban them to prevent social castes from forming. Those commercials that try and sell you wallpaper for your phone. Not the wallpaper, but the ringtones. Some of them would ask like €7 monthly for a crappy cartoon character yelling at you as a ringtone. Never ever knew someone in real life that paid for that. Different colored ketchups. There was one color I would not eat. It made me gag. I think it was the purple one. The purple ketchup tasted different. It smelled different. They claimed it was all the same stuff to make it, just food coloring. But if that's true, that food coloring did something extreme to it that they just denied that it did. I'm not saying it was bad, I'm certainly not saying it was good, but that purple stuff did not taste like ketchup. Susan Powder and her Stop the Insanity videos. She was everywhere on cable TV in the 90s. Now there's a throwback, back when my mom was all into Snackwells and non-fat Entenmann's. Snackwells! That's a blast from the past. Are those still a thing? MySpace. Everyone seemed to piece out of it at the same time. It was good for posting music online, and then they lost all the music with bad migration. I'll never forgive them for the music I lost from my band around 2006 or 2007. Yeah, I miss that about MySpace. It was a social media site that was also sort of like a band camp. There were so many oddball and unique indie artists and bedroom producers you can find on there. Bacon fetish. For like a decade in the early 2000s, people wouldn't shut up about how bacon was the best thing ever. T-shirts, bumper stickers, memes, aprons, etc. That crap was everywhere, and these days bacon is just a normal food again. I worked with a guy whose personality was bacon. That was it. Bacon for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Bacon alcohol, bacon candy, bacon clothes. And he wasn't trying to be obnoxious or cheesy about it. He just thought he really was badass because he wasn't afraid to eat bacon. He also weighed 300 pounds and crapped his pants once when he got wasted. Slot car racing was huge in the 70s. Now it is nearly extinct. I show my class CNN 10 most days. Today's story was about toy companies worrying about having their toys in stock for Christmas due to the dock worker shortage. For some reason, the segment focused on slot cars. I kept asking what year this was that CNN 10 thought kids would connect with slot car makers. Fall Guys. As soon as Among Us came out, there were Bean memes for 2 weeks. Then everyone just kind of forgot about it. No, Among Us just kind of got fizzled out over like a year. Oppa Gangnam Style. I don't care that people started to hate on it and then it disappeared. It brought a ton of joy to the world, and I will always love it for that. Heelys. They're kinda back in style with some of the older Gen Zs. It's an I walk around with a CD player in 2001 type of aesthetic. It's crazy that CDs are retro now. Like, I'm in my early 20s and I remember CDs. I still have some, except nothing plays them anymore. Am I old? Ponchos. It felt like every girl was wearing them in the 2000s. And then I've never seen one since. When someone asks me, "Do you have a poncho?" I don't say no, instead I say, "Not right now," because I do have a blanket and some scissors. I am never more than 2 minutes away from owning a poncho. Is this a Mitch Hedberg or just a Hedberg sequel? Squid Game. That's about 90% of popular Netflix shows though. The downside to releasing the entirety of a show at once. Dane Cook. Got deployed to Iraq in 2004, and it was pretty hellish. Had an MP3 player, CD, with a few burned discs, and his first album, Harmful, If Swallowed. Squad and I must have listened to it like 200 times over a 6-month deployment. For that reason alone, I will always love that dude, and it's a damn shame what his brother-in-law did. Google Glass. They were never actually released to the public, and they've been turned into manufacturing HUDs for people who assemble aircraft engines or work on complex fabrication. Internet chat rooms like AIM. They went full circle with Discord. It feels like the old chat rooms of the 90s and early 2000s, both the good and the bad, but they filter bots a hell of a lot better now. Discord has been a massive revolution for online communication, especially in the gaming scene. Before Discord, every group used something else, be it TeamSpeak, Skype, Steam calls, etc. There was some new program every month it felt like, all pretty much garbage or expensive. Then Discord comes along and it just works. Has a nice interface, is completely free, and already has all the basic features. Now everyone is on Discord. There's no game out there that doesn't have a Discord server. It's really incredible how successful Discord has been. Sneakers that you pump up. I had models with both internal and external pumping mechanisms. I remember when I used to watch wrestling as a kid and John Cena would pump up his vintage Reebok pumps before doing his finishing move. Flash animations. Came about in the late 90s and early 2000s. Before Flash was officially retired, it died a slow death. I used to send e-cards all the time that used Flash. I was a boy-crazy 5th grade girl and found a bunch of suggestive but funny e-cards about cute animated guys with songs like "It's Raining Men" that I would send to my friends. I still remember that one because a bunch of cartoon men in Speedos fell from the sky onto a beach, and at the end, one animated guy looked around the beach and then out at the screen and made a suggestive noise. Whoosh, right over my head. Turns out I was sending e-cards that were meant for gay men. Monster High. I remember they were very popular in the mid-2010s. I owned so many dolls and watched all the movies. There were so many, but once I outgrew them, I barely ever heard from them again. Apparently a bunch of moms got it cancelled for some reason, but it's supposedly making a comeback in a year or two. New animated series, maybe dolls, and I think a live-action movie. Tamagotchi died pretty quickly. In retrospect, it kinda sucked. The thing would die if you didn't sneak it into a school and feed it 24/7. They're seemingly fairly common amongst kids again. My daughter got one as a present, and I ended up having to take it to work to feed it to her throughout the day because she would be devastated when she got home from school to find it dead. I felt really grown up sitting at my office desk feeding a Tamagotchi multiple times a day. Anyway, she was only interested in a week, and now it's hidden in the back of a drawer. Why are they coming back? It makes even less sense with smartphones. Slap bracelets. Are they still a thing? They are, but they're not the same. It's not metal, it's plastic, and they don't work as well. They also don't double as a weapon to beat your siblings with, which is why my mom told us they went away when we were kids. I had a few cheap ones, and when they split open, you could see that they were made from metal tape measures. Still had the markings on them. So genius upcycling for the time. Those pictures where you stare for a while and the blur becomes a sailboat. Magic Eye! The Snuggie. I still have mine, and I wore it to teach virtually last year. I remember a time where yo-yos were hugely popular. During my time in grade school, schools would just let yo-yo people in to shill their products with a big presentation and all. Among Us. Among Us went on for ages before it actually died. After the game itself died, it still lived on in Amogus memes for a few months. Even now, I still sometimes find memes using Among Us music ironically. It certainly died, but it didn't disappear overnight. Waterbeds. Still alive and kicking in Germany. My husband's family all have waterbeds, and it seems really common here. I'm British. We had one when I first moved here, but damn, it gave me a backache. My husband also thought the waterbed was helping his backache, but it turns out it was causing it. A nice box spring later, and he's pain-free. Juicy couture velour sweatsuits with the writing across the ass. Saw a girl in her late teens wearing one this week, and said the same exact thing. Wonder if they're making a comeback. Do you guys remember Kinetic Sands? I loved those when I was a kid. My kids have it, still at Target. Rest in peace, Bionicle. There's still an active fandom, highly recommend. MySpace and Bebo. Life was so much simpler when you only had fights over replacing someone in your top 8. Devil sticks in the 90s. You don't want to sell me any death sticks. Osiris shoes. Soap shoes was where it was at. Napster, AOL, and MySpace. Multi-disc CD players. Am I showing my age too much? Oh man, I forgot about these, LOL. Dating myself here, but Cabbage Patch Kids. I think those have stayed around. Now Garbage Pail Kids. Challenges, as in the Ice Bucket Challenge. Planking. They're still around, just disguised as TikTok. Segways. I still think they are great for transitioning from one topic to the next. Vine was cool, then it died. When you die after getting killed. Skip-its. I broke so many of these in my garage. BlackBerry phones along with BlackBerry Messenger. I haven't seen a Slinky in real life in over a decade. I had one once. I straightened it. Teen hijinks comedies. American Pie, Road Trip, Superbad. Those all seemed to die out about 15 years ago. I think part of it is that everyone gets branded as the next Superbad and inevitably falls short. Plus, the whole Apatow Rogan crew kind of shifted popular comedy movies to being centered on 20-something stoners. Mad About You. Does anyone remember this show? It ran for 8 seasons, about the same time as Seinfeld and Friends. It was hugely popular. It had about 10 million viewers. It had great lead actors, Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser. It was critically acclaimed. It won 12 Emmy Awards. People just got sick of rom-coms. It fell off the face of the earth. You can stream it, but no TV channel shows reruns. King of Queens, which is a vastly inferior sitcom, has reruns. Not Mad About You. Agreed completely. See also Spin City with Michael J. Fox and then Charlie Sheen. Beanie Babies. Those never went away. The concept of them being an investment did. Game of Thrones. I've never seen something so incredibly popular that left almost zero cultural impact. Now there are a bunch of kids named Khaleesi, and they will have no idea why. It became popular because it caused the trend of low fantasy but with realistic medieval practices. The noble knight getting screwed over by the evil bastards. Being a fan favorite won't always save you. Being some form of the chosen one really doing a number on your mental health. Kind of the opposite effect of samurai media. making out that the samurai were these Bushido code heroes of the people, when in reality they really weren't. Popular might be an odd word to use here, but serial killing, at least based in the US, there are apparently many times fewer serial killers today than some decades ago. The theory is that we basically got bored with them, stopped talking about them, and so there weren't as much in the media to inspire them. More recently, of course, Netflix is chock full of them, so maybe that's about to change. Apparently it had something to do with leaded gasoline. Decoder rings. Be sure to drink your Ovaltine. In the mid-50s, I had my parents send away for a special decoder packet from Ovaltine. It was a plastic film that you put over the TV screen. You got a crayon with it too. During the commercial, lines came on the screen and you traced them with the crayon. The survival message was, drink more Ovaltine. 5-year-old me was kinda disappointed. Whip and Nene. Throw dabbing and the mannequin and ALS challenges in there too. That 2015 to 2016 stretch was an interesting time. If you look at the history of the Grammy Awards, you'll find some odd early recipients of the Album of the Year award. It was considered an achievement in recorded audio, and not necessarily in music. For example, in 1963, the Album of the Year Grammy went to The First Family, a lighthearted pastiche of the Kennedy White House featuring a young nightclub entertainer named Von Meter. A New England native with a passing resemblance to JFK and the accent to match, Meter essentially pioneered the concept of a comic impersonator. In 1963, he was one of the most famous people in America, making frequent television appearances and selling out live performances. The event, which took place in Dallas on November 22, 1963, ended Von Meter's career overnight. Hats on men, except in winter. Hats of all kinds were popular for men of every social class for more than a century. Then suddenly, around the early 50s, men put them down and never picked them up again. I learned recently that it was because people bought automobiles which had shorter roofs, no room for hats. Riding a trolley or on the old-fashioned cars with open roofs, lots of room for hats. The Macarena. You can still hear it at millennial weddings. Sour Skittles, apparently. I've looked all over town and can't find them at all. I normally crave sour things when I'm doing a lot of schoolwork, and I can't find them here or at the shops, like an hour away. I would say Walking Dead after Season 8. All zombie media, in my opinion, has a short shelf life. There's only so much the real zombies are the humans plot that they can do. Dabbing. I'm glad I'm old and thought it was kind of dumb from the start, but then it lasted far, far longer than it should have, or than I expected. Thank goodness the collective finally decided it was over, and it disappeared virtually overnight. Actually, it's kind of impressive how fast it went away. Wallflowers in the 90s. Jacob Dylan's voice is just the perfect combination of his dad's oddity and actually singing. That's not a dig on Bob, by the way, he was never a great singer anyway. His immense talent was in his writing and his performance. Those hamster toys which moved by themselves and made noises. They had accessories like tunnels, or those home phones either clear with colorful parts inside or shaped like anything but a phone, hamburger, lips, or cartoon characters. Yo-yos. Man, 1996 or so was a wild ride of split knuckles and soaring emotions. People really liked Bill Cosby. Going outside and playing with your friends instead of spending all day cooped up with your phone. Inline skating. Every kid I knew growing up had a pair of rollerblades either for street hockey or to use at the skate park. Now it's a rare sight. I've got 2 pairs currently, but my driveway is rocks. Life as a child from the countryside, I never got to use rollerblades or a skateboard either for the same reason. I could have been the next Tony Hawk, damn it. Olestra, the fat-free potato chip that made everything you eat run through you like a freight train, may cause leakage. This will scream, I'm old, but I'm gonna say it. ICQ. At one point, it was so popular that having an ICQ number with fewer digits was considered cool. We used to have ICQ dates because DSL wasn't a thing yet, and we had to sync our online time. I don't know how or why, but everyone migrated to MSN Messenger at one point, which was definitely an inferior product back then. No offline messages, bad UI, fewer features. Uh-oh, door slam. Crazy Bones. Hello Neighbor. The game had a cool idea of sneaking into a creepy neighbor's house. The ideas they had were great. randomized prop and furniture placement, keys to unlock the basement being randomly generated, an AI that adapts to your every move, etc. Though after Alpha 3 it just got worse. The AI did less adapting and just placed 4 billion bear traps and cameras at one door. The art style, while I honestly enjoy, was just not a fit at all for what the original Alpha's shown. Then after the full release it just kind of died out. TinyBuild calls it a smash hit, when it basically stopped existing after release. Now they're releasing spin-offs, a failed TV show, begging MatPat to do theory on their game. Hello Neighbor 2 looks interesting though. The art style is more refined and the game mechanics feel much better, but it's still a buggy mess like the franchise always was. The Old Man of the Mountain, New Hampshire 2003. It lives on in your state quarter. Iggy Azalea, where did she go? Haven't heard from her or about her in a bit. I know she was on Wild 'N Out that time, but that's it. iPods. I mean, I still have both classics somewhere, but doubt the battery works now that I wore them out. Now most people use their phones for music. I know there are quite a few who still use them, especially audiophiles, but I stopped when it became too bothersome to carry a phone and an iPod in my pocket with the weight. Writing letters. Pen pal subs on here are pretty active. I have 3 pen pals right now. That's a thing? Ooh, where do I sign up? Nobody cares about Harambe anymore. They just put a giant sculpture of him at Wall Street. Internet forums. I miss being able to bump up a post and continue the discussion. That's what sucks most about Reddit. Your post has less than a day to gain traction, and then, no matter how popular, disappears into obscurity within hours. I'd say VR. The way it was hyped was it was the next generation of gaming, and actually, very few games use it, and even fewer use it well. I was stoked and spent about $2,000 on mine, about 4 years ago. Gave me motion sickness no matter what game I played. The most I could play at the time was about 5 minutes. I sold it for $300 earlier this year. Politeness. I find in real life people are still pretty alright, at least those I'm encountering. Social media is even more of a cesspool than it was a couple of years ago, though. Stranger Things. I mean, not really. I bet it's pretty big when the next season comes out. Yeah, it's just an ebb that always happens during off-seasons. Same with The Mandalorian, for example. Most people aren't thinking about it now, but once a new season comes around, it's gonna be the talk of the town once again. Common sense. Now so rare, it's practically a superpower. My common sense is tingling.
Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story to these that you want to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.